Hello, 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 hello. Hello, 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 hello. That was 7 hellos. Happy Wednesday, everybody. April 2nd. How's everyone doing out there? See, Rich was in the chat. TM, VKM, TM, RV Davis is checked in. Check on in. I'm also on Twitch, Sam_Lichtman, if you care. Shoot, I forgot to change my Twitch title. Let me do that now. It's Liberation Day, folks, allegedly. Depends how you define liberation, I guess. According to Trump, it's Liberation Day. Let's say that. Although, to be honest, I don't feel very liberated right now. Jason Lazarus is here. Yo, yo, yo. Wish I wasn't at work, but happy to be listening. I'm happy to have you here, Jason. If you don't know what Liberation Day means exactly, it is the day that Trump is going to drop a bunch of tariffs. The announcement is coming at 4 p.m. Eastern, so in about 2 hours. VKM says, liberated from what? Prosperity? Yeah. Look, I am not an economist. I don't know. I have a basic understanding of the economy. It seems like, at least in the short run, it's going to cause a lot of trade wars, a lot of prices to rise. I think the Trump administration's claim is that in the long run, it'll bring back American production and countries will stop taking quote unquote advantage of America and it'll bring back American prosperity. That's their case. I want to learn more about all of this today because, again, I don't know a whole lot about this, to be frank. I don't think anybody, no one knows what's going to happen, right? There's a lot of economic projections, but a lot of economic projections are often wrong. So I don't know. I'm also interested in hearing people in the chat, what they think about all of this. Do you feel liberated? What do you think about tariffs? Stuff like that. Hello, Ian. Stefan is here. Guten Abend. It's maybe liberation from Elon soon. Let's hope. VKM says, to be honest, it's idiotic. If manufacturing returns, much of it will be automated and create very few jobs. That's an interesting point. Yeah, that's a very interesting point. I hadn't thought about that, but it makes a lot of sense. That's an interesting point. I think, me and my dad were just talking about this, and my mom was saying, he wants to destroy the U.S. economy, and I don't know if he actually does, but I think he actually believes that tariffs are going to help. And I think and I also think that he's thinking from the perspective of a rich person, too. He's not thinking from the perspective of an average American. And I think from the perspective of a rich person, tariffs could possibly help. That's my take. Interested to hear everybody else's take. Anybody on Twitch? Say what's up on the chat. Twat. Chill, bro. Chat if you're on Twitch. I think that's a key part of all this. He's thinking from the I don't think he thinks... I could be wrong, obviously, but I don't think he's out there being like, I want to destroy the American economy. I think he's thinking from the perspective of a rich person. And if you're a rich businessman and you want to increase your own productivity, your own manufacturing, you add tariffs, right? Or am I tripping? I don't really know. Again, I'm open to learning today, exploring this. Hello, Lori Robinson. How are you? If anybody has any good videos, explainers, people they like who talk eloquently or intelligently about this, send them my way. Let me know in the chat. Or email them to me, lichtman.sam@gmail.com. Eric says they call him the blue-collar billionaire. Lori says, I've not heard anything good about tariffs. Yeah, I think I agree. Most of what I've heard from most news outlets and stuff, that they're talking pretty bleakly about it. And I don't think there's anyone arguing, even Trump. I don't think even Trump is arguing that it's going to make prices go up in the short term. Maddie B says, I feel so conflicted because I think to myself, what is it going to take for enough people to realize how bad this is? So part of me wants it to fail, but I don't want innocent people to suffer. Yeah, I think that's the issue. Most people who will suffer from a lot of Trump's decisions are the most vulnerable, or just your average American, honestly. VKM says, my biggest concern is that it will also affect worldwide prices since companies will sneakily raise prices to make it equal everywhere. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Interestingly, let me pull up my screen here. Interestingly, I think the stock market is actually doing okay today, which seems a little strange, but I don't know. Again, this is all a little confusing to me. Lori says, if we look back in history, like before the Great Depression, we see tariffs are bad. Correct. Yes. If you look back in history, tariffs are bad. But, we are in a totally different place than we were, during this. The economy and the globe is totally different than it was during the Smoot-Hawley tariffs. But maybe that's worse. I don't know. Nintendo just announced the Switch 2. And new games are costing $80. Goddamn. Is there... Okay. Sorry. One quick video game tangent, because I do love my Switch. New Switch. Wow, that's true. Nintendo 2 Switch launches in June with new Mario Kart World game. Interesting. What's it look like, though? Like this? So it's just bigger. I guess that's fine. New hardware. I'll probably get it. Oops. Hello, Dennis. Switch 2 games are cheaper in Japan than the US, so it's not completely unrealistic to suspect tariffs are the reason for this. Interesting. I guess we're all moving to Japan to get cheaper Switch games. But I think the stock market is doing pretty well today. They are saying it's being driven by extreme fear, though. But the Dow is up a little bit, the S&P 500 is up a little bit, and NASDAQ is up a little bit. Tesla's up big. Nvidia's up, Ford's up. I'm surprised by this. You would think with these looming tariffs today, like the stock market would be crashing. I wonder why. Here, Eric has an explanation. Eric Magazu says stock markets usually only react when new information comes to light that changes what people thought. Since people have already known about these tariffs, market may react if something new is learned. Okay, that's very informative. Thank you, Eric. But do we know exactly what the tariffs are going to be today? I thought we didn't know for sure. I don't know. Again, I'm trying to learn today for the most part. Let's see if we can find any information. Again, if you know of good videos, Trump tariffs. Hello, James. All right, I'm going to listen to O'Leary. I don't usually like this guy, but I'm interested to hear his perspective.
America freed itself from tyranny and the world from oppression.
Night in America, there's good news, bad news. Which do you want first? A new Fox poll has good news for Donald Trump. His approval rating is 49%, which is an all-time high. The same poll, however, shows angst among Americans about the economy. 71% of those surveyed predict a recession this year.
Wow, that's a pretty big number for Fox News poll. 71% of Fox News polls say there's going to be a recession this year. Yeah, the 49%, I don't believe that, but Patty says, I don't think tariffs will bring business back to the U.S. The U.S. can't compete building quality products with wages, insurance, and taxes. That's why many businesses went to Canada, Mexico, and Europe. Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I've always been of the perspective, like, we have to move forward as Americans. We have to be innovators. We have to be pushing the envelope on green energy or chips, whatever it might be. I just don't think going backwards to making America a manufacturing country again is gonna work, Axel says, Sam, didn't your dad say taxes are meant to help the wealthy? You mentioned prices going up, but don't remember how that was possible. Yeah, I think that's what I was saying earlier too. He's thinking about this from the perspective of a rich person. One second. Jacob B says, good afternoon. Great show last night. I liked the format. Yeah, it was a really awesome show last night. Crazy that my dad predicted the outcome with 6% of the vote in, but.
On tariffs in particular, President Trump will impose a 25% tariff on imported vehicles. Here's the president on the benefits.
This is going to lead to the construction of a lot of plants, and in this case, auto plants. And you're going to see numbers like you haven't seen, both in terms of employment. Takes a little while. You're going to have great construction numbers initially, and then you're going to
see, even Trump is admitting there's going to be hurt before there's anything positive that comes out of this.
Ultimately, you're going to have a lot of people making a lot of cars.
The president is preaching patience and a level playing field. Tariffs have already been announced on Canada, Mexico, China for other goods, but
so what is he announcing today exactly? I'm confused.
Auto tariffs could raise $100 billion in revenue. Here to navigate a complex economic and trade picture is.
But wouldn't the American people be paying that revenue?
O'Leary Ventures chairman, Mr. Wonderful himself, Kevin O'Leary. Welcome, sir. The president says he wants a level playing field and more things made here. Can tariffs...
Isn't O'Leary Canadian? Wouldn't he be upset about tariffs on his home country? I don't know.
The threat thereof do both.
It can. Here's how it works. The best way to think about this and really dumbing it down, making it real simple is these tariff schedules in Canada, Mexico, and now 13 other countries. We've got a list of 15 coming out next week, 15 countries. What Trump is trying to do is...
God damn, 15 countries.
Examine all of these, and some of them were put in place right after the Second World War. So there's a lot of imbalance. If you look at aggregate of tariffs in the United States on inbound, they're much less than what countries are charging on outbound into their countries of American goods. So he's just saying, let's go reciprocal. Why don't you drop yours to zero, and I'll talk to Trump about dropping his to zero, and we'll both have zero, and we'll combine the economies. Now, that makes sense. I think this is one...
That sounds like massive globalism. I thought these people were anti-globalism. Becky says, O'Leary is always telling those on Shark Tank to produce in China, practice what he preaches. Fair point. Sup, LB?
Giant negotiation tray, and we're starting April 2nd.
All right, they don't call you Mr. Wonderful for nothing, and they don't call me a cynic for nothing. Do you see this having a happy ending, the tariffs and the retaliation and the more tariffs and more threats of retaliation? I mean, do you see this cycle breaking and us emerging better on the other side?
I do, but not with Canada in the next 6 weeks, because there's an election going on there right now, and Trump's had a direct influence on it. Trump is being used as an existential threat.
So tariffs on imports, this is a Fox News poll. Only 36% think it will help the economy. 39, this is older numbers. Now, only 28% think it's going to help the economy. 53% think it's going to hurt the economy. Those are crazy numbers. Cohen says, hi, Sam. I was happy with the results in Wisconsin yesterday. Hope this gives Democrats some hope. I was happy, too. Pierre Holmes, what's up? LB, you're a legend. Becky says, Mr. Wonderful, my ASS. No one wants to deal with him. He is truly a shark. Ivana says, I've heard apologists say that the economy will go down, but then it'll go up. BS. Obama inherited a terrible economy, and it never went down, only up.
Both candidates are saying only I can save you from what Trump is doing to us, and using Trump as leverage to get their voting bases out. So Carney is with the liberals. He's talking about Trump being the end of the free world as we know.
Pierre Holmes says, the columnist at the Wall Street Journal said that Trump's tariffs war could plunge the world into a second Great Depression. Yeah, that's a scary thought. That's a terrifying thought. VKM says, as an aside, true prosperity for workers often needs unions. The GOP will weaken unions, so it won't help workers. Very good point.
And the other candidates in the same boat, Pierre Poilievre, saying, look, Trump, I will defend you against Trump. I will fight Trump, yada, yada, yada. Now, it's great for politics. It's bad for trade negotiations, but it's just the timing is wrong. As soon as the election's over, the country will have a new leader with a 4-year mandate, just like Trump, and they'll fly down to Washington right away and start the negotiations. Where they go, in my view, is a positive thing, because these tariffs do a tremendous amount of damage on both sides of the border. 17 states, their number one trading partner is the...
When I hear Kevin O'Leary talk, I just don't think he's talking from the perspective of your average person. He's talking from the perspective of a rich person. And to me, that's not helpful or informative.
Is Canada. And 75% of output of Canada is purchased by the United States. So there's no way. This is a marriage, and we're having a little tiff right now. A little, difficult time in a long 100-year marriage. That's exactly what it is.
All right, viewers, you have the president and Mr. Wonderful himself both preaching patience, so I'm going to listen to them.
How much patience are we supposed to have? I want America to do great. Everybody does. But it's like, how much damage is going to be done before, we get a few more manufacturing plants? And like someone said earlier, they're just going to be housed by automated production, William says, I'll probably sound like a Trump thumper, but why is it okay for other countries to tariff us, but we cannot tariff back? I don't know. Maybe that's a fair question. I don't know the answer to that. Carla says, why is Mr. Wonderful a thing in politics now? That's a good question. I don't know. Here's former U.S. Trade Rep Ron Kirk.
President Trump's tariff announcement coming later today, but the details are still unclear. Plans could include reciprocal tariffs on individual countries, across-the-board tariffs, or something else. Joining us right now is former U.S. Trade Representative Ambassador Ron Kirk. And Ambassador, do you know anything more than we do at this point?
Becky, I do not, except for the fact that since the president has scheduled this for a full Rose Garden ceremony, I don't think that we should expect this to be some moderation of the president's very consistent stated belief that tariffs are going.
Jason says in response to, why is it okay for other countries to tariff us, but we can't tariff back? Jason says, I think it's because Trump is doing blanketed tariffs. Maybe that's why.
Going to help him restore manufacturing to the U.S. economy, which sadly is not good news for American businesses, and even worse news for American families, because they're going to bear the brunt of these taxes.
We are kind of on the working assumption.
Right, that seems clear, right? It's like the tariffs are eventually going to be paid by us, the American public. So even if it goes, this plan seems to help rich people. It goes, there's billions of dollars in revenue to the Treasury, but do we ever see that back, or how does that work?
That what we heard yesterday.
I want someone on the show right now to interview. Anybody, any economic experts who are available right now?
at least reported in some areas, was that 20% across the board tariffs was being considered. What would that mean in your estimation, just in terms of what it means for our economy, what it means for the global economy?
Well, I'm not an economist, but I don't think you can find any economist, anyone who studies the market that hadn't been fairly
Ivana, thank you so much for your donation. I really appreciate that.
consistent that they think at a minimum this will stall economic growth, probably lead to higher inflation. I'm not steeped enough in economics to forecast whether or not it would.
The other thing is, everybody's like, I'm not an economist, but economists also get stuff wrong. It's not like economists are perfect predictors.
Lead to a recession. But what I do know, it's going to make it more expensive for every family in America to put food on the table. For those families that might be in that situation, they've held on to their car too long and need another car, it's going to cost them
LB, thank you for the donation. You're the best.
20% more. I mean, this is fairly simple math, and notwithstanding what the administration says, this is a tax that's going to be borne by importers, and in many cases where it involves consumer goods, passed directly on to consumers. I don't know that many businesses outside of the sort of high-tech sector that can take a 20% hit to their income. They don't have that kind of coverage, and so this is not going to be a good thing. And the
thing I've noticed is, when I hear a guy like him talk, he's talking about numbers. He's very concrete, very specific. Kevin O'Leary was sort of just general. He was like, yeah, it'll hurt, but eventually it'll be fine. We're in a marriage tiff. O'Leary was just saying a bunch of cliches and generalities. When I hear people talk from the other side of this perspective, the other side of the spectrum, they are usually using more concrete numbers. So that makes me think maybe they're more accurate. I don't know. Social Mail says, I am an American living in France. Trump confused the VAT/TVA national sales tax applied to all foods, approximately 20%, and service, approximately 5% inside the countries with tariffs. Look, here's another thing I think about Trump. I don't think Trump is that smart when it comes to the economy. He might be a good businessman when it comes to real estate. I honestly don't think he's that sharp when it comes to the general economic situations of countries.
The part of it, Becky, is because
Jacob B says, I saw something about UAW supporting the auto tariffs a few days ago, but unsure if that's verified. All right, let's verify that. That's an interesting perspective. I also think, they have a very, very specific perspective too. That your average American might not share. Just in terms of they will benefit directly because their jobs are directly tied to this. If car prices goes up, it doesn't really affect them that much, Well, UAW president called Trump deplorable because he stripped unions' rights of federal workers. So there's that. Again, someone said that earlier. Trump and the GOP are so anti-union. I don't see anything that says they're supporting this. Thank you, Heather Grass. I appreciate you a lot. Here we go. UAW head Sean Fain reacts to Trump's 25% tariff on imported cars.
Percent tariff on imported vehicles is getting a thumbs up from the president of the United Auto Workers Union.
Okay, there you go.
Sean Fain told Major Garrett.
Dylan Bond says, Happy Billionaire Liberation Day. I think that's probably the best way to describe it. It's rich people liberation day. He had 6 bankruptcies. All right, I understand Trump was not the best businessman, but he did have some success in real estate. Let's just say that. How about that? Patty says, there's always been tariffs. Trump thinks by raising tariff percentages, this will bring American prosperity back, but only for the rich. Patty, I appreciate that donation. You're the best.
The tariffs will bring jobs back to the U.S., but he said more needs to be done for workers.
Tariffs aren't the total solution. Tariffs are a tool in the toolbox to get these companies to do the right thing. The big part of this that gets left out a lot of times is if they're going to bring jobs back here, they need to be life-sustaining jobs where people can make a good wage, a living wage, have adequate health care.
You can see Majors.
Very good point. Trump added $5 trillion to the national debt. Okay, good point. All right, people are grilling me for saying Trump is a good businessman. I'll take that back. He had some success in real estate, but my whole point was he doesn't know what the hell he's doing when it comes to economic issues. I really don't. I really believe he's a borderline idiot when it comes to that, and or is only thinking about things from his perspective, which is a rich man's perspective. I think Sean Fain made some good points there. And I think the part of the issue is too is like tariffs are a tool. Will these corporations based on this tool then do the right thing? I don't think anybody really knows. And like you said, if people aren't paid a fair wage, if they build manufacturing plants that are all automated, I mean, that's not going to help your average American much. Mick Mulvaney, wasn't he part of the Trump administration?
Right at the White House, Kelly Meyer, thank you. And while the president maintains foreign countries will be bearing the brunt of the tariffs, former White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney says the numbers don't add up. In an op-ed, Mulvaney wrote for our partners at The Hill that the Trump administration's economic case ignores basic principles and risks setting unrealistic expectations. Mick is with...
Cohen says Donald Trump treats politics and the economy as a 1970s mid-level real estate gangster. That's what he is. Very good point. Marvelosa says, I'm sure you heard the news that Elon and Trump are breaking up. I don't know if they're breaking up. It said I've heard reports that Elon's going to distance himself a bit from politics and the White House, which is fine by me. Jacob B says even if jobs are brought back here, it's going to be a multi-billion-dollar investment that'll take years. It's not going to happen overnight or affects the economy in any immediate way. Right. LB says stupid people support a stupid leader. That doesn't make him of her great or her great. It just makes them a cult leader of stupid people. Sorry, it's just true. Damn, that's some fighting words, LB. Stefan says, Robert Reich says in his videos that the tariffs will lead to tax cuts from which the rich will benefit disproportionately and for which the poor will pay. I'll watch some Robert Reich videos after this. He's a very smart man.
With us now, News Nation political contributor and the former acting White House Chief of Staff under the Trump administration. So I'm going to act as math teacher for a second. Show me your work here. What's the equation that you think doesn't add up to an economic reality here?
Good morning. Basically, we import about $3 trillion worth of stuff to generate $600 billion a year. You have to have a 20% tariff on everything. And that math adds up until economics and human behavior kicks in, which is what the Trump administration is counting on, is for people to stop importing stuff and to start buying stuff that is made here. They're also trying to encourage people, businesses, to set up manufacturing here so that we can buy stuff made here. And the more stuff you buy from here in the United States, as opposed to, say, from China, the tariff money goes down. So the point of the article, my point now, is you can't have it both ways. You can't say the tariffs are going to generate a huge number of American jobs and reinvigorate American manufacturing and say it's going to generate $6 trillion worth of revenue. Those two things are mutually impossible.
That makes sense.
And that's why I wrote the piece. I think the Trump administration is, especially Peter Navarro, overpromising and going to underdeliver. There's no way that tariffs will be able to do both of the things that the administration is talking about.
So what I'm hearing from you, I mean, it's consumer sentiment, right? It's how people are feeling. So how do you expect the administration to strategize around that and the optics of it in the president's remarks today as he lays out the specifics?
Yeah. What I think they're going to do, and they sort of telegraphed this a little bit, take Navarro's comments, I think that may be an outlier. The messaging other than that has been pretty consistent from the White House. Generally speaking, yes, prices may go up a little bit in the short term, but once everything that the administration is trying to do kicks in, the economy will be much better, prices will go down, wages goes up. What does that mean? Well, it means after the markets reset because of tariffs, and that takes time, you've also going to have things like the deregulatory initiatives from the administration, making it easier to get goods and services to market. That lowers prices. And then also they're talking about revamping tax policy here as we get into the springtime. So that should help the economy as well. So I think what the Trump team is rightfully trying to do is try and prepare people. Look, it may be a little bit worse in the short term, but it's going to be a lot better in the long term.
And you mentioned China. It sounds like the president will be tougher on China. Is that the right move, or could we even be more aggressive?
Yeah, I think that's the one thing. There's very few things right now, Marnie, in Washington, D.C. As you could tell, you covered every day here on News Nation, that very few things that are bipartisan. Being tough on China is one of those things. There's economic reasons to put tariffs on China. There's also geopolitical reasons to put tariffs on China. In fact, I happen to think that our stance toward China is also impacting the administration's policy towards things like Ukraine. They are focused on China almost all of the time, and they are right to do so. It's our primary competitor, maybe adversary, depending on what terms you want to use at any particular time. But I think the focus there is...
I don't like using the term adversary when it comes to China. Competitor, that's fine. Adversary, I just feel like we should be figuring out ways to work with China. I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that because the Chinese Communist Party is so bad. Let me take that back and rethink that.
Is correct. What's got a lot of people shaking their heads and scratching their heads about this tariff policy is things on countries that are friendly with us, like Canada and Australia. But again, the president will have a chance to explain that today at 4 o'clock.
Finally, I want to get your thoughts on this breaking news out of New York. A federal judge dismissing the charges against New York City Mayor Eric Adams with prejudice. Politically speaking, I
don't really care about Eric Adams. Trump tariffs, Robert Reich. Russia's not our adversary. That I don't agree with. Now, if China attacked Taiwan, I would say that China is our adversary. Just like I believe because Russia attacked Ukraine, they are our adversary. So his last video was a month ago, but maybe it'll be a good explanation. Let's see if he has anything sooner.
If you're Trump wants to raise tariffs, and it's going to come out of your pocket.
Tariff. It's more beautiful than love. It's more beautiful than anything. It's the most beautiful word.
Trump keeps...
Did he say that? I missed that. That's a funny clip. Heather Grass says, things made in China are way cheaper than they would be if they were made here. That's true. Heather Grass says, things made in China... Oh, I just read that. Angel Rob says, here in the UK, we have a de-risking policy when it comes to China. We still do business with them. Yeah, I kind of agree with that. Although I really don't like the Chinese Communist Party. Sharon says, basically, good business is agreeable, not antagonistic. Trump's antagonism is destructive. China is already trying to spy on the U.S. and mess with elections, not as much as Russia, though, so they are adversarial in a sense. That's fair.
saying that other countries pay for tariffs, but that's not how they work. Tariffs are effectively taxes on imported products, which we ultimately pay. Say there's a 60% tariff on Chinese imports. When Walmart imports Mr. Coffee machines from China, which is where they're made, who pays the tariff? Not China. Walmart pays the United States government. For example, if Walmart buys a coffee machine for $20, the 60% tariff means they'll pay an extra $12 in taxes, bringing their total cost to $32 per machine. And if Walmart is paying 60% more, do you think they will cut into their profit margin and absorb that cost? Of course not. They'll pass it on to you. In fact,
Right, of course. Corporations are in the business of making money. Limited light. Anyone feel liberated yet? No, I don't.
Walmart's CF.
I feel today should be called the day of confusion and unknown. It's just like no one knows what's going to happen. Everybody's confused. Let's change the name.
Has already said it expects to raise prices in response to Trump's tariffs in order to protect its profits. Now, targeted tariffs can be used to protect industries critical to national security. This is what the Biden administration did when it levied tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, solar panels, computer chips, and batteries.
Right, all markets that we should be pushing forward because they are the future.
Are making massive investments in these technologies domestically. But Trump has proposed across-the-board tariffs on almost all imports, particularly from our biggest trading partners. He claims this will help boost American manufacturing and spur job growth, but tariffs alone don't result in new production capacity or more jobs. Plus, American manufacturers import a lot of raw materials.
I think that's a key thing that I've learned so far today is like tariffs can be used as a tool for sure. When you use them with your eyes closed and just use them broadly across the board, they're not as effective as a tool. And also you need to do other things on top of the tariffs to benefit your average American. Then it says the day of I don't know. Yeah, that's a good word. It's a good slogan.
For products they make, so their prices would go up too. While Americans would pay more for imported goods due to tariffs, countries that export the products are also affected. China's government might retaliate with tariffs of its own on American-made products. That's called a trade war, and there are no winners. One of the biggest global trade wars.
See, interestingly, Kevin O'Leary made it seem like trade wars are just, a marriage tiff and we'll get over it. Robert Reich is making it seem that trade wars are a big deal.
Started with the Smoot-Hawley tariff in 19...
Hello, Julianne. DKM says Biden's tariffs on EVs and solar panels because China was selling them below cost price to wipe out competitors and form a monopoly. Right, again, more targeted strategic tariffs rather than these blanket tariffs.
30. After the 1929 stock market crash, President Hoover and Republicans thought sweeping tariffs would help the economy. They didn't. Import prices surged, and exports plummeted because of other countries' retaliatory tariffs. Global trade fell by 60.
I know a lot of people use Smoot-Hawley tariffs. My dad uses it. Robert Reich is using it. Is there any validity to the fact that maybe this is an outdated example? The economy, our economy, the world economy was so different that it's not as comparative now. Thumbs up if you agree with that. It's not comparative. Thumb down if you think it still is comparative in the chat.
6% worsening.
God, I hope this music isn't copyrighted.
The Great Depression. Smoot-Hawley seemed to prove that across-the-board tariffs don't work. But then came Trump's first term and his sweeping tariffs largely on China. Higher prices from Trump's tariffs on...
Okay, here's a better example. I like this, Robert. Thank you.
Thousands of products are estimated to have cost American families close to $80 billion. And this cost took a larger chunk out of the incomes of poorer families than richer ones. That's because tariffs are regressive, meaning they take a higher percentage out of the paychecks of working people than out of the paychecks of the wealthy. If you make $50,000 a year, the cost of a coffee maker going up due to tariffs impacts you more than someone making $1 million a year, who can better afford the price increase. Following Trump's move, China retaliated with its own tariffs on American exports, which led China to import less from the United States. In the U.S. agriculture industry alone, this resulted in a $27 billion loss in exports from mid-2018 to the end of 2019.
Wow, that's big. I didn't know that.
And even though the government increased aid to impacted farmers, farm bankruptcies shot up 20%. American manufacturers.
Ollie says Nixon implemented a 10% tariff across the board in 1971, and it didn't end well then either. Interesting. Hello, Abe. Candy Sig Addict says Trump's steel tariffs from his first term generated a few thousand jobs in exchange for the economy as a whole losing tens of thousands of jobs. It's a bad deal. Interesting.
Manufacturing also shrank as raw materials became more expensive and demand for exports slumped. One study estimates that Trump's trade war cost nearly 300,000 American jobs. But instead of learning a lesson from this fiasco, Trump is now promising even bigger tariffs. In addition to more tariff hikes on China, he plans to levy 25% tariffs on everything from Canada and Mexico.
Again, what I said about earlier about O'Leary's Fox News interview. He was talking in generalities and cliches, and Robert Reich is going in on data, on numbers, on precedent, which makes me trust him more.
Too. These new tariffs would cost the typical American household an additional $1,200 in 2025. But if Trump makes good on previous pledges to slap tariffs on imports from every country, American families can expect to spend as much as $4,000 more. Trump has suggested he would use the revenue from tariffs to offset more tax cuts for the rich and big corporations.
Yeah, we don't want that. And we know he's going to do that. We already did it in his first time. He's going to do it again.
But of course, as I said, any revenue raised from tariffs would be coming out of your pocket. The tariffs you pay could help facilitate this massive transfer of wealth from most Americans to the super rich.
That's a scary thought. This right here is probably what scares me the most about all this. Stefan says the U.S. will come out of this trade war isolated, the rest of the free world united. There are already talks about Canada joining the EU. No, that's not true. Canada joined the EU? I've not heard that. Limited Light said, anywho, about to go teach some math. Wow. Dennis says it looks like a pyramid scheme. I know, seriously, right?
So when you're paying more for groceries, gas, and housing, know where your money is really going and know whom to blame.
Robert Reich makes a very strong case here, guys. That was a really good, well-made video. Whoever's doing his stuff is really, that's, shout out to them. That was a solid video. Simple, direct, engaging, visually engaging. Wow. What is this? Is Trump right about Canada charging 250% tariffs? My guess is no. Canada asks for EU membership. I have to look this up. I have not heard this. Canada, EU. I see an opinion piece about it. Can Canada join the EU? Right here it says, the most likely conclusion, therefore, is that Canada can't legally join the EU. Boom. Sometimes you guys come in here with sketchy news stories. Abe says, I'm watching you on my commute home. This is better than going on my Spotify and listening to music. Heck yeah, dude. What's up with TikTok ban? I don't know what the hell happened with that. Somehow it was banned by the Supreme Court, and then an unelected president, a person who wasn't even elected, just said some words and it came back. Jacob B says, big protest on April 5th. Perfect time to go against the tariffs if they actually take effect. Ollie says, I'm Canadian and there's zero talk about joining the EU, nor would we want that. Thank you, Ollie. Some of y'all are sketchy. Cody G says, gas when Biden left office was $3.50 per gallon in Washington State. It's now $4.19. Euronews, the news company that said Canada can't join, is linked to Orban. Are you sure about that? Euronews. It's headquartered in France. Why would it be linked to Orban? Second paragraph, last sentence. Euronews is currently majority owned by Alpac Capital, a company indirectly linked to the Hungarian government of Viktor Orban. Okay. VKM, you're a smarty. You proved me wrong.
Emily, just thinking the fact that some of the tariffs that President Trump instituted against China were kept in place by the Biden administration. How long do you think that a tariff war to this degree that we're expecting at 4 p.m. today, how long before it has real world impact?
Yeah, great question. I mean,
great question.
As Courtney said, it's unclear how long these tariffs themselves will last and how broad they'll be and what products will be hit and what exemptions will look like. But I think the one thing that is clear is that tariffs are a tax, and those taxes are going to be passed on to U.S. firms and consumers almost immediately. The fact that we're talking about tariffs not just on imported manufactured goods from China, but across the board on everything that we import from Mexico and from Canada, including so many of the items that show up on grocery store shelves, I would expect those price increases.
The thing about some of these tariffs, too, is like, all right, we're putting a tariff on everything from Mexico, right? There are certain just agricultural products like, say, avocados, tequila, right, that you can really only grow in Mexico just because of how the climate works. So it's not like we're going to eventually be making avocados in Minnesota. It's not the same as some of like the auto tariffs, right?
To be virtually overnight.
Damn, overnight? That's crazy.
I'm just thinking of your role as a former trade representative. How do these things, a lot of people may be asking, well, why is this taking place now? And why is it that for the longest time, other countries have been able to institute tariffs on American-made products and services, and yet the United States has not been able to deal with that forget on a comprehensive level, just on maybe a few, like European Union. Why is it that this has not been dealt with before?
Well, Jose, I think it has. If you look over the last 80 years, tariffs on U.S. exports have gone down from...
Lori and Heather say, you like me being on during the day. Thank you. I appreciate that. William says, Minnesotavos. That's hilarious.
Our U.S. tariffs have gone down from about 8% to around 2%. Now they're back up to 8%. And depending on what the president announces today, they could go up much more significantly. And that's indicative of a lot of work that's been done over the last several decades to bring countries together and reduce tariffs overall. We've got free trade agreements, obviously, with Canada and Mexico, with about a dozen other countries where most of the tariffs are zero. And that covers a lot of our major trading partners, not the European Union, not Japan. President Trump moved away from a trade agreement that would have given us access to Japan's market and eliminated many of their tariffs. But there has been progress over the last several years. I think what's happening now is, as your other guests have noted, the president is really determined to bring more manufacturing back to the United States. And he thinks that by creating this tariff wall, he will create a powerful incentive for companies to do that. I think there may well be isolated announcements. There have been some already of $100 billion here, $1 trillion here. These are significant announcements in many respects. But most companies are sitting on the sidelines because they're not sure, as you said, what the president's going to do, how long it's going to last. And he's been quite open to sort of putting tariffs on in the morning and taking them off in the afternoon. And companies can't make big capital allocation decisions.
Thank you, Lori, for your donation. I don't know. I have the feeling that after today, he's not going to pull them back. Just a gut feeling. 8 p.m. in the UK, 9 p.m. in France, but at least I can watch live and not in replay. Hey, yeah, it's better than the middle of the night, right?
On the basis of such uncertainty. So we're seeing investor confidence going down, consumer confidence going down, concern about inflation, concern about growth and recession potentially, and all of this is going to have an effect going forward.
And so, Michael, I'm just thinking, for example, on what was interesting to see how the reaction was back then to TPP, right? And the 12 countries in the Asia-Pacific area that were going to be a part of this TPP.
Heather says, so awesome, Sam. You have people from all around the world watching. That is awesome. I'm very grateful for that.
Opposition to that wasn't necessarily on, a specific political party.
Candy Sig Addict says, are we really going to have folks with masters and PhDs making widgets all day? I don't know what you mean by that exactly.
The concept of the TPP and going from 8 to 2%, it's almost like the antithesis of what President Trump's concepts are.
I think that's right. I mean, one thing that we're missing in this whole conversation is what's the role of exports? Because
at the end of the day, this just seems like a very big gamble. Like, I feel like we're at a casino and we're just rolling dice and we're playing roulette. Like, is it possible this could work? Maybe, but it's a gamble, man. Jacob B. said the GOP platform is bringing manufacturing back to the U.S. and filling the factories with children. And the sad thing is, Jacob, that's a fair point.
Export-related jobs in the United States pay more than other jobs, about 16% more on average. And so for a number of years...
Widgets equal manufacturing things. So is your point, Candy Sig Addict, that like our populace is too educated and like that's the issue, or what are you saying? Sharon Novak says a bad gamble and the poor will pay for it. Not even the poor, just like your average American is going to pay for it. Olana says, I think they mean they're not going to be any jobs for them. I see. Okay, I see what you're saying. Stefan says, I think the tariffs are just a fixed idea for Trump that he has had for a long time, and that won't even pay off for the rich. Interesting. I agree with that too. He's been obsessed with tariffs for forever. Do you think the third party and social unrest cues were wrong because there was widespread resentment against Biden administration for the economic and immigration, as well as lack of voter commitment? No, I don't.
The policy had been, let's try and open other markets to U.S. exports, whether it's agriculture, manufacturing, or services exports, so that we can get more good paying jobs here in the United States, that companies don't have to move abroad to serve these fast growing markets around the world. We're now sort of missing that. And instead, the president is saying, let's put up these tariffs and force people to produce more in the United States. Obviously, more production in the United States is great. And if you can be competitive, that's terrific. But it will be more expensive for consumers. You'll find that the users of these products, about half of our imports are inputs into manufacturing downstream. So whether it's the aluminum, you're showing cans right now, that the aluminum that goes into those cans, as that becomes more expensive, beer becomes more expensive. When things become more expensive.
Yeah, that's something someone brought up the other day is like, buy more American cars. But a lot of American cars, even ones manufactured here, all their parts are made in Canada or China. So it's like, yeah, it sort of feels like, what am I trying to say? You want more U.S. manufacturing, but you're also hurting the efficiency and the cost efficiency of American manufacturing at the same time.
People buy less of it. And when you have less demand, together with reduced consumer confidence, you've really got the potential for lower growth going forward. And it's hard to do all the things you want to do in a country in a low growth environment.
And so, Courtney, some unions have actually applauded some tariffs as a tool. What's their thinking?
I think they are of the belief. We saw the UAW, for instance, come out with a statement of support last week when President Trump announced tariffs on all Ford-made vehicles. I think their hope, and this is, not by means the consensus, that Trump's tariffs will revitalize U.S. manufacturing in the United States, and that will result in.
But we heard Sean Fain on this show. He was very clear. He agreed with it, but it was only one tool in a toolbox, and a lot of other things needed to happen as well.
More jobs in the auto sector. But again, that's not necessarily guaranteed by any means. I think if you look at the
40% of the 30,000 parts needed for one car are imported.
Economic data that we've received just in the past 2 days, it's not great, especially the more real-time kind of sentiment surveys that we've received. For instance, the manufacturing sector, we got some data yesterday that shows that we've...
Wow. Kia uses a lot of U.S. and Canadian-made parts. But how much are Canadian? Because Canadian parts are going to be tariffed as well. They use more than Ford. That's another thing with a lot of these car companies. They're so globalized now. It's, to say, like, don't buy a foreign car. It's like, well, Kia's a foreign car, but apparently 80% are made of U.S. parts. I just think this is also, there's so much nuance to this, and just Trump is not the man to deal with nuance. You know what I mean?
Received, for instance, the manufacturing sector. We got some data yesterday that showed economic activity contracting after expanding after 2 months. We've been in this prolonged manufacturing recession. It finally looked like maybe it was over. Yesterday, it showed that's not necessarily the case. We have, as Ambassador Froman said, we have this fear that growth is going to...
Impact of Trump's auto tariffs, imported vehicles, 5,000 to 15,000 per imported vehicle, domestically made vehicles. See, even domestically made vehicles are going to increase. Again, I know eventually they say, well, eventually those parts will be made in America. I guess we'll see.
To slow alongside higher prices. And that's kind of this nasty stagflationary economic scenario that no policymaker wants to deal with. So I think that so far, the economic indicators that we're getting, especially on the manufacturing front, are not great. Obviously, we'll see how it evolves in the months.
There are 10.1 million jobs connected to the auto industry, 49.9% of total U.S. employment. That's a lot. There's no doubt. That's a lot of people, and a pretty big percentage just to the auto industry.
in weeks ahead.
Yeah, and Emily, think tariffs. Mexico is our largest trading partner. Substantial tariffs would immensely impact the Mexican economy. What are the unintended consequences of the Mexican economy suffering a devastating blow? Today, Talia Sheinbaum, the president of Mexico, said...
I also think there's something just sort of personal in this with Trump. He likes being this deal maker, and you're fired, and I'm the tough guy. And I think he likes the idea just within his own ego of being the guy who cracks down on tariffs and is tough on Mexico and doesn't take shit from Canada. And, I think he wants to be that guy.
She was not going to go for the tit for tat. You put in a tariff, I put in a retaliatory tariff, but communication continues there. I'm just wondering, have people thought about what are the long-term consequences, or what would be the long-term consequences if the Mexican economy
Search for You says, didn't we move all of the auto jobs out of the country because we didn't want to pay them? Not all of them. Apparently 10 million of them still work in the U.S.
Thanks.
Why did no one tell Maryland drivers about this new rule?
Candy Sig Addict says, the thing is, once they build the factories here, it'll be really difficult to get rid of the tariffs, and we'd be stuck paying high prices for worse stuff. So you're saying they build the factories here, then we'll just keep the tariffs, and we'll be making... Why would we be making less quality stuff in the U.S.? I mean, the stuff coming from China is pretty low quality, right?
Yeah, great question. So the short answer is yes, of course, people have thought about this pretty carefully and for a long time.
Austin says we still have the 1965 chicken tax. What the heck is that? 1965 chicken tax. Fried Jemmy says, I'm really liking these regular live streams. You talk about things I watch. Nice. Fried Jemmy, I appreciate that. The chicken tax is a 25% tariff on light trucks and originally on potato starch, dextrin, and brandy, imposed in 1964 by the United States under President Lyndon B. Johnson in response to tariffs placed by France and West Germany on imported U.S. chicken. Interesting. So you're saying once these tariffs are in place, they're just going to always be there because sometimes these taxes just stick and no one ever repeals them? Damn, if only we were still getting potato starch and dextrin and brandy from France and West Germany. How can this still be a thing? West Germany doesn't even exist. Did it just suddenly apply to all of Germany? Is this even still enacted? I guess so. It's on light trucks now, I guess. VKM says, stuff coming from China isn't low quality. Stuff you pay less for is low quality. Apple is made in China. Okay, fair point. Diamond Dave says, I've never bought a new car in my life. Just bought a used car if you absolutely need. Just buy a used car if you absolutely need one. A new car depreciates thousands of dollars the minute you drive it off the lot. That is true. Stuff coming from China may be low quality because have you ever thought that it might be American standards that allow it in? No, I hadn't, and thank you for enlightening me.
A couple of points. So the first thing is when we think about what Mexico...
Guys, 74 people watching, and I'm at 70 likes. There's 4 of you who haven't liked this stream yet, so you gotta like the stream.
Mexico exports to the United States. And
if you're not subscribed, please subscribe and click that notification bell so you know you're live. Also, if you feel like becoming a member, that'd be great. I also much appreciate donations because I'm doing live streaming full time now. I'm live every single day of the week. So far, I've been live every single day of the week. I don't know if I'm going to be live on weekends every single day going forward, but for the last 2 weeks, I've been live since last Monday, I've been live every single day. Just Do It says, optimistic view on production in foreign countries. The waste/byproducts/pollution is not located in our soil/air. I remember seeing parts of China where they have to wear a mask. Yeah, but that'll all come back to bite us in the end anyways. I don't think that's a long-term solution. Eventually we have to deal with the fact that human waste and pollution is killing our planet. Social Mail says, yes, many tariffs stay in place. There is still a custom tax on French wine if you bring in more than 2 bottles. I don't know if this is still the case in America, but Back to the Future. But in Back to the Future, they say the best stuff is made in Japan, not the UK. Fried Jemmy says, I like subbed and notified too poor for a membership. I totally get that. If it's not in your means to donate or to become a member, totally get that.
Look at the data. I just refreshed my memory looking this morning. The biggest 2 exports of Mexico to the United States are cars, autos and auto parts, and electronics, broadly defined. And the key with both of those sectors is the vast majority of that export value from Mexico to the U.S. comprises imports to Mexico. And a lot of those imports come from the United States. So this is classic global supply chain trade. The poster child industry for supply chain trade is automotives and the automotive sectors.
I think the right wing has just got too obsessed with globalism and made globalism such a boogeyman. And look, there are definitely problems with globalism, but there are also a lot of advantages to globalism. And like I've said earlier, I just don't know if rewinding the clock to make us manufacturing steel and auto parts is going to save America or launch us into the future in the way that we need to be. He's living in the golden age, yeah. It's it's going to take so much time, energy, money to rewind the clock, right? And that's even ignoring some of the things that Robert Reich says, like in the end, the average American's going to be paying for all this and eventually to go to tax cuts for the rich. I mean, if all that happens, this is bad. Clear and simple. Hey, Sam, have you thought about doing a show with the Midas Touch brothers? Hey, if they want me, I'm there. I have to step away for 1 second. Let's see what Brian Tyler Cohen has to say.
Best and worst vinegars
I'll be right
for
back.
weight loss. Apple cider vinegar. It's a health trend to drink shots of apple.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown. Glenn, I think you would agree that it's really difficult to get us surprised at something that's happened at the hands of this administration. What we're about to talk about today is exactly that to the nth degree. We've spoken about these alleged gang members who were deported to El Salvador with no due process. And the worry in the lead up to this, as we've been discussing this, is that there are folks who've been rounded up who were rounded up in error, who didn't deserve to be there, who aren't the gang members that they are accused of being. And now we have proof of exactly that in a story that is perhaps one of the most frustrating, infuriating, and sad things that we will ever talk about. Can you explain what happened here?
You know, Brian, this is exactly what the due process clause of the Constitution is designed to prevent. And Donald Trump just virtually shit all over the Fifth Amendment due process clause. And here's what happened. A young man by the name of Kilmar Arbrego Garcia, who is a legal resident of the United States, and who actually had a court order protecting him from being deported to El Salvador, issued by a judge in 2019. We just learned that as part of this, mass roundup and stuffing into planes of alleged Venezuelan gang members, they snatched up this young man who happens to have a wife, a 5-year-old special needs child. Both he and his wife work full time, according to the court filing. And I'll say it again.
All right, I'm back. Sorry, folks. I just had to do something really quickly. What were they talking about? I don't know. I'm going to get back to the tariffs. Thank you, Stefan. I appreciate your donation. I want to hear from more perspective of people who are pro-tariff. Who's Vanessa Yurkevich? Vanessa Yurkevich. She's just a correspondent. I respect you, but I'd like to hear from somebody with more than just a journalist. Who's this guy? He thinks this guy thinks there's going to be a crash coming. Economics help. Do you agree that the mainstream media is more spineless than the Dems? Because they loathe them for the economy, immigration, fentanyl, and crime. They're both pretty spineless.
Talking about. Which year do you think that I'm talking about? Stocks are overvalued, speculators borrowing money to leverage their investment, the economy outwardly doing quite well, but consumer credit, consumer debt rising rapidly, house prices overvalued, and a wave of optimism and enthusiasm based on new technology, but is going to change the economy. Well, it could be 2001, 2007, or perhaps even 2025. But one difference about 2025 is that you also have a new range of factors to contend with, which could be quite damaging. Economic growth is slowing down. Societies are aging. There's a very real threat of a global trade war, and the global financial system is more integrated than ever before. The 2008 credit crisis didn't lead to a new world of careful, responsible finance. It really just showed markets that there was nothing they couldn't get away with. Now, there is a golden rule that investors like to hold on to. The US stock market has averaged returns of 10% since the start of the last century. Who cares about the odd crash, which is more like a temporary setback? Even if you buy just before the last financial crisis, you would still be sitting on big gains today. But this 10% rule is not set in stone. Japan is a pathfinder for an aging economy in retreat. Did you know that Japanese stocks are basically the same level as 36 years ago?
That's not good.
Back in the boom years of 1989. That's basically 0% growth for the past 36 years.
Diamond Dave says the myth is that the U.S. can be totally self-reliant. We were the king of manufacturing after World War II, mainly because every other major country in the world was decimated by war. That's an interesting point.
Japanese house prices still lower than that peak time in the early 80s. The 20
That's crazy. Their house prices are lower than they were in the early 80s. God, we need that in America, kind of.
century saw,
I mean, I know that's a sign of a bad economy, but I don't know.
unprecedented growth in rising living standards, rising GDP, and rising corporate profit. But global economic growth has been slowing down in recent decades. This shows a combined growth rate of Japan, Europe, and the United States. In recent years, there's a clear downward trend in the rate of growth. The post-war economic boom is largely over. Even China, which was once growing at 10% a year, is now having its own problems. One reason for different growth prospects is that global demographics are rapidly changing. Birth rates are heading towards record lows. Firstly, societies will age, and then towards the end of the century, a population will start to decline. The ageing of society and fall in birth rates will put pressure on government welfare spending and pensions. This is projections for the UK. Unless the government change policy, debt is forecast to rise.
Phew! That's a big swing up.
Sharply. But reducing something like pensions is very difficult politically. And it's no different in the United States, with debt set to rise sharply. And President Trump is not known for his fiscal conservatism. If anything, the US is likely to see...
Sam, you should do a show with Midas Touch or Brian Tyler Cohen. Guys, I am willing. That's not the issue here. They would have to be willing.
Bigger budget deficits because of large tax cuts probably coming this year. So demographics will be a challenge, but it doesn't stop there. The world is seeing rising global temperatures, global warming, and an increased number of extreme weather events.
This guy is smart. Who is this guy? Economics help. This guy is smart. He's using a lot of data. He's talking about a thing, including climate change, which nobody ever talks about in terms of affecting our economies.
Which can be very costly to the economy. The cost of home insurance has more than doubled in the past few decades. In the US, locations vulnerable to extreme weather events may struggle to get any insurance at all. Already,
there we go.
Insurance losses have increased.
I know Florida and Southern California, there are big insurance companies that just won't cover your house anymore.
And this places pressure on...
Sam, what did you major in while in college? Communications.
Households, firms, and the government. With weather becoming more unpredictable and volatile, there's a risk of much bigger losses to come. Insurance losses could cascade through the global financial system, putting a lot of pressure on governments and firms who are already stretched.
I just have this fear, especially lately, especially since living through the LA fires. I just feel like insurance companies are going to fuck us over in the end.
There also remains the risk of higher cost-push inflation coming down the line. For example, rising food prices this year, even a shortage of raw materials, shortage of things like water can put upward pressure on prices. In 2022, we saw the devastating effect of cost-push inflation.
Kalita Kapow says about the keys, I keep saying that no prediction system works when democracy is under assault. I think that's a very good point, actually.
With people squeezed from rising prices and real wages not keeping up. But another bigger cloud on the horizon in the short term is a threat of a major trade war. Now, if President Trump would impose the tariffs he's talked about...
Ian says historian Simon Schama says all the tariff talk about the eventual return of manufacturing never takes into account what the future of manufacturing will look like. Robotics, AI, and all the rest. Agreed. That's why people like Elon love this, because you bring more manufacturing to their company, which they own, their stock prices go up, they make more money, they turn all their manufacturing into AI-based, robotics-based. I don't agree with your idea that the economy keys should be modified because they worked during the Gilded Age when wealth inequality was just as bad as today. Fair point. Abe says, not going to lie, I think you make a pretty good teacher. This live gives chill classroom vibes. We're just being chill and we're just in the classroom chilling.
It could lead to the highest tariff level since the Great Depression. Free trade definitely has its critics, but it did achieve two things. Firstly, it kept prices down. Cheap goods from China helped reduce inflationary pressure in the West. Secondly, it was very profitable for multinationals, who were able to shift manufacturing to the lower cost places for different parts of production. US corporate profit has soared in recent decades, not just rising in real terms, but as a share of GDP too.
Is that good though? Dennis says this guy has a ton of points and a ton of data, but people with a ton of money will never hear nor care to understand his words. That hurt me. Like I felt all the hope leave my body. I'm still staying hopeful because we got smart people like this guy in the world. Am I streaming the press conference? Yes. I think it starts in about 30 minutes.
Free trade means production is no longer based in one country. Everything is interlinked. The iPhone in your pocket is made and designed in over 43 different countries. The US car industry relies heavily on importing raw materials from Canada and
hope and strength. That's right, Rich.
Components from Mexico. So the current global economy is very much reliant on the current system of low tariffs and modular production. It leads to large economies of scale and large profits for the companies involved. Now, if President Trump's threat to place large-scale tariffs materializes, it will be a really big shock to the global economic system, but has served Wall Street very well up until now. And it's a risk not currently reflected in market prices, which are near record highs, price to earnings really very high compared to historical trends. Markets are really kind of assuming that the past global trading system will remain largely intact. But maybe it's something markets don't really want to accept, the inconvenient truth that the future may be a very different world. Of course, there is uncertainty about how much tariffs will actually be increased. For example, the threatened 20% tariffs on China and Mexico were delayed for 30 days and may never actually be implemented.
And here we are today, and they're being implemented. So that's, from his perspective, it seems that's not good.
Is enough never actually.
Everybody's asking, who is this guy? This is Economics Help. This is a channel. I don't know what his name is, but his channel is Economics Help. Go subscribe now.
Be implemented. Even this uncertainty is enough for firms.
How did the working and middle class vote for Trump when his policies literally hurt them? Because he's promising, he's promising to turn back the clock. And when you do turn back the clock, right, to the times that Trump is talking about, America, at least for the middle class, white middle class, was pretty good. And that's why a lot of white middle class or poor people vote for him. Whether that's possible or not, I don't think, again, I've said this a million times, I don't think that's possible to turn back the clock. But I think that's why they do it, because the age that which he is promising was pretty good for white middle class Americans, and they want to go back there.
To think twice about cross-border investment because it raises costs and deters investment. Currently, the US is looking into reciprocal tariffs, and this could lead to big shocks. For example, Colombia has a 70% tariff on coffee imports to protect its coffee industry. Now, if the US were to retaliate like for like, it would lead to a big shock for American coffee drinkers.
Right. Again, that doesn't, like, someone mentioned earlier, like, why can't we do reciprocal tariffs on people who are tariffing us? It's like, are we really going to fight Colombia on the coffee economy, on the coffee trade? Like, they've got a pretty good stranglehold on that. Like, let them have that. We don't need a reciprocal tariff on that. You know what I mean?
If the US economy did get into any kind of difficulties, it's quite likely that it would put more pressure to put up tariffs. This is exactly what happened in the 1930s. In the Great Depression, it did get into any kind of difficulty. It has a 70% tariff on coffee imports to protect its coffee industry. Now, if the US were to retaliate like for like, it would lead to a big shock for American coffee drinkers. If the US economy did get into any kind of difficulties, it's quite likely that it would put more pressure to put up tariffs. This is exactly what happened in the 1930s. In the Great Depression, rising unemployment caused workers to pressure politicians to protect their industries. But whilst this may provide some short-term help for some industries, higher tariffs led to cascading negative effects.
This idea of protecting certain industries, I feel like is sort of a fool's errand. It's like, I understand people don't want to lose their jobs, but I think we should be investing more on helping people transition to industries of the future rather than spending so much time and energy being like, let's protect these archaic industries. I don't know, maybe that's naive to say, but it's a perspective I have. Thumbs up if you agree, thumbs down if you don't agree in the chat.
Higher prices, reciprocal tariffs, lower exports, lower demand in the economy. It's widely acknowledged that the Smoot-Hawley tariffs didn't cause a great...
Like, for example, Trump and the right wing are big on, coal and natural gas and bringing miners back to work. And I hear that, and that's obviously it's a very powerful message, and it works, right? It works existentially, but I don't know if it works in reality, because why are we spending so much time and energy bringing back coal when we could be spending that time and energy pushing jobs of the future, energy of the future?
Depression, but they did make it last longer.
Because that's one thing that America does well, is we push forward, and being first often helps us.
And made it deeper. And this is why the global...
China catches up to us quicker than they used to, but the rest of the world doesn't catch up to us that quickly. We could have years of being the leaders in green energy production,
The economy will be very vulnerable to any kind of higher tariffs, which lead to kind of tit-for-tat retaliation. Now, after the...
VKM says, to be fair, those industries aren't exactly archaic, just becoming too expensive in the US, but otherwise I agree. Maybe archaic isn't the right word, but is it worth, for example, in mining, right? Is it worth blowing up all these mountains across Appalachia, causing all this environmental destruction to keep this industry around when we know that we have the technology to move forward in employment, move forward in technologies?
2008 crash, many were left wondering how come problems in the Florida housing market caused such widespread financial turmoil around the world. It was an insight into how global economic finance is increasingly integrated and reliant on liquidity of the financial sector. Basically, commercial banks around the world were buying US subprime mortgage debt without ever realizing what they were really buying. Credit rating agencies gave these risky assets a AAA credit rating, they're safe and secure, so banks, with a lack of investigation, never realized how much they were exposed to bad debt. In 2008, the Royal Bank of Scotland went bust, and Alistair Darling, the then Chancellor, tells how the chairman of a bank promised him after the bailout that from now on, they will only take on risk that they understand. It's a revealing insight into how financial markets were rewarded for taking on risk. Because if they took on risk and they succeeded, they made huge bonuses. If they failed, it was the taxpayer who bailed them out. But the big question is, has anything changed since 2008? I mean, there were new regulations, Dodd-Frank in the US, higher capital requirements. But arguably this is mere tinkering at the edges. Global finance has not been fundamentally reformed. We still have those perverse incentives where risk is rewarded, institutions are too big to fail, and the implicit assumption that government will bail out and act as lender of last resort. So a cynical view may be to say that since the government spent billions bailing out the banks last time, the big lesson of the credit crunch is not that finance needed to be fundamentally reformed, but there's really nothing that the big banks can't get away with. Even in 2023, the US saw medium-sized banks like Silicon Valley, Signature Bank and First Republic all go bust. Yet despite high risk in the financial system, the new Trump administration is looking to deregulate further. And with deregulation and tax cuts, this may lead to strong growth short term, but it is exactly the kind of thing that can lead to a further build-up of an asset bubble, the kind of boom and bust dynamic we've seen so many times in recent history. And also another problem with finance is that regulators are often fighting the last battle. Last time it was all about subprime mortgages, credit default swaps, collateralized debt obligations. But financial markets are very adept at moving on, creating new instruments. A big growth area in recent years is a growth in non-bank operations, new forms of money and lending, and crypto. There's been a surge in risk-taking amongst investors and speculators, leveraged stocks, meme coins, etc. US savings have fallen really quite rapidly amongst households because money has been put into
Damn, that's crazy.
stocks. If sentiment changes, it could have a very large impact on financial markets and the economy. And one thing we definitely learned from the last credit crunch is the psychology of human behavior. We tend to follow the herd. If meme coins soar, we want to join the rush. We don't want to miss out. But then millions get burned when prices fall. It's really not a question of if financial markets crash. It's really a question of when. And
Agent Smith says the economy is based on debt. It's the US's number one product, debt. Nothing else is even close. It's a debt-based society. What do you mean by, can you expand on that? I hear you, but I don't quite understand.
And how deep will it be?
What that means.
In 1987, the stock market fell 25%, but with the help of federal intervention, it bounced back and the economy was largely unaffected. In 2008, markets crashed and it precipitated real panic, financial hardship, and a lost decade of austerity, low growth, and rising inequality. Now, like a stuck clock, if you predict a crash, you are going to be right some of the time. We will eventually have some kind of crash. But even putting that to a side, I think in 2025 there are quite a few new threats that were not around in the post-war period. What's happened in the past, in the 60s and 70s, where a period of growth, is not necessarily going to happen in the coming decades. But the further you look ahead, the harder it is to know what's actually going to happen. But in the short term, this video focuses on the new wave of speculation and risk-taking and why American households are taking on more debt and risk.
Check it out at Planet Fit.
Agent Smith says, what's the average amount of money that the population owes on credit cards alone, not even going into real estate mortgage debt? Yeah, probably a lot.
Hello and welcome to...
But I just don't understand what you mean by it's our number one product. Do you think Kamala lost because too many Americans felt hopeless and angry? I don't know. That's such a general comment. It's hard to comment on it. This guy seems smart. I would check him out. It's a product. The banks sell debt. Okay, I see what you're saying. But then where do the banks get all their money from? Us, eventually, I guess, because we're in debt. Yes, basically. Okay, I'm understanding now. It's a huge feedback loop, right? And then the banks, whenever if they're not making money, they just get bailed out, right? So it's this feedback loop of like banks selling us debt, us giving the debt back to the banks, and if we don't, then the government comes in and bails out the banks and they can keep selling us debt, right? Is that bad? I mean, it sounds bad, but it also kind of feels sort of indestructible in a way. I don't know.
Chris, and I think that I've learned my lesson on speaking for the president before he and I have actually talked about an issue.
Pussy.
You
have
would
to veto
veto a federal abortion ban.
I think he would. He said that explicitly that he would.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it
Well,
came to
I
your
won't
desk?
have to.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well,
I don't know why I'm watching this. Yes, because it's to a point that we will never crawl our way out beyond the point of no return. But like, if it's sort of a system that will never really totally end, at least it's consistent. I don't know. Hello, Susie K. DKA says the problem with Trump is that he's not trying to build a national consensus on his agenda like how Obama did with healthcare. It's all executive orders, so any next president can undo all of his stuff. That's a good point. You know, a lot of people are like, look how much Trump's doing. It's like, bro, they're all executive orders. They're all kind of meaningless in a way. Philip H. says it's not indestructible. You will see wages stagnant and costs continue to rise until something is done, like taxing the rich. Gotcha. OnlyFans and Amazon are trying to buy TikTok? Maybe that's true. Do you believe Obama really thought Harris would not win the election right after Biden dropped out? I don't know. I have no idea. Are people reporting that he said that she couldn't win? I don't know. I know the thing is, like, I feel like you always hear, especially in the United States, you always hear Republicans like going crazy about the debt. But it never comes back to bite us. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it is biting us in terms of affordability and cost of living crisis. George is here. Viva la liberación. This is the 5th term of Obama. He calls the shots. What you talking about, bro? Susie K says, I'm ready to hear about the tariffs. Got 2 bags of gummy bears to help me cope. I want some gummy bears. The American economy is based more on debt. It's based more on debt, on cheap money. This results in faster growth, but also more severe crashes. Philip H. says the debt bites us every year. $1 trillion of the $7 trillion we spend federally goes to pay interest on our debt. Right? So just our money doesn't go as far because it has to go to pay off our debt. Rich says market crash ahead sometime soon. This can't go on for long. It's either a crash or banks pay limited money like in Greece back in the day. Definitely don't want to be like Greece. They went down the tubes, those, right? Do I think tariffs will actually have any long-term benefits? Certainly not if they use the money to give the rich tax breaks. The conference is starting soon, right? Probably just to get best to get it from the AP, right?
I tell you.
Rich says, yes, the Greeks couldn't get more than $50 a day because the banks didn't give out money. That's scary. Philip H. says, markets are more stable than normal due to businesses making record profits the last 4 years over price gouging. The markets did pretty well. I mean, they didn't do well, but they didn't do terrible today. They did pretty well. But still, extreme fear is driving the market. TM says, I saw the Commerce Secretary say he was going to use tariffs so people under 150K yearly wouldn't have to pay taxes, but I don't know if that ever happens. I doubt it. Who's the Commerce Secretary right now? Oh, this guy? Don't listen to a word this guy says. Lutnick.
Today. I don't know if you saw this today. I feel like in any other moment, this would have been wallpaper all over the American media. But this statement today from Donald Trump's Commerce Secretary about what Trump is doing to Social Security, this tape is such a political disaster. I feel like I almost have to close my eyes because I can't bear to watch it. Just, here you go. Check it out.
Let's say Social Security didn't send out their checks this month. My mother-in-law, who's 94, she wouldn't call and complain. She just wouldn't. She'd think something got messed up, and she'll get it next month.
Yeah.
A fraudster always makes the loudest noise.
This is such a generalization. This is, what was he even saying?
Boys screaming, yelling, and complaining. And if you,
that's not necessarily true.
All the guys who did PayPal, like Allan knows this by heart, right? Anybody who's been in the payment system and the process system knows the easiest way to find the fraudster is to stop payments and listen.
Yeah.
Because whoever screams is the one stealing.
Huh?
He's talking about Social Security checks to elderly and disabled people. Stop the payments and listen. Whoever screams, that's the one stealing.
That's such a fucked up way to see the world.
Ron, you all good in the back? Check 1, 2. Hey, hey. Audio check 1, 2.
Audio
Thumbs up
check
for
1, 2.
Maine.
Hey, hey.
Cuts. Rise, you all good? Check 1, 2. Audio check 1, 2. Check 1, 2, 3, 4. Check 1, 2.
Fried Jemmy, can I see your message? Yeah. I haven't seen you. That's the first message I've seen you send in a while. Diamond Dave says, if a fraudster makes the loudest noise, why is Trump the guy that... Why is this Trump guy the only one I'm hearing? Got him. Did you see banks telling government workers who lost their jobs that they deserve it because they seemed like a clown? No, it's just horrific. I don't even want to think about that. Get ready to pay 50% more for everything. Tariff day. Yikes. Are those props with construction hats, these guys? They very well could be. Although they do say UAW on them. I feel like the UAW would make a lot of noise if they use fake UAW people. They can always get people from certain organizations to show up. It's not that hard. All right, I guess we're just waiting for the president to show up. Oh, there's RFK Jr. You see him? Right here. That guy. Oh, there's Marjorie Taylor Greene. Yuck. I don't usually like to say yuck about people. Like, I think that's just so mean, but she might be the only one that I'm willing to do it like that. I feel like I don't feel bad about it. There's Lutnick right here. This is just Where's Waldo of the Trump Colt. Who else do people recognize? Is there a restriction on messages about Trump? Not from me. I don't think so. I don't know why YouTube would make a Trump restriction. Jim Banks. Someone sees Jim Banks. I don't know if I know who Jim Banks even is. This is Peter Navarro, this guy right here, right? Who's this guy? This guy looks familiar. But I can't. They plan to put 1,000 anti-nuclear missiles on satellites all around the Earth. What do you think about that? Who's they? I don't know what I think about that. I have to research it more. Oh, Doug Collins. Yeah, that's Doug Collins. Oh, I just kicked my camera. Oops. Marjorie Taylor Greene is better than AOV. Do you mean AOC? I guess you're allowed to your perspective, Joseph. I don't agree with it, but you see Voight? Is that Voight? Is this Voight right here? Is that Lil Marco right here? It kind of looks like Lil Marco, but I can't really tell. There's there's Hegseth. What's this guy's name? Donald? Something Donald? Little Tiny Marco. Byron Donald, I think is his name, right? Yeah. I'm just checking if my camera's straight. I think so. Little Tiny Marco. There's Mikey Johnson. There's Tulsi Gabbard. Is it normal for the whole cabinet to be there for something like this? Like the DNI doesn't seem like she has any relation to tariffs, right? Search for uses. I don't know if I can listen to this. I might have to come back for Cliff Notes. This is just devastating. If you watch with us, it'll be better because we'll laugh, we'll make fun of him. It'll be easier to take. I love how Trump announces after the markets close. Oh yeah, that was definitely on purpose. Brittany says, man, I can't believe we're actually living this reality. I know it. Like, just naming all these people, I'm like, wow, these people suck. I can't believe they're ruling our entire country. Sam, serious question. Has your dad talked to Charlie XCX yet? No, I don't believe so. I wish he could hook me up then. That'd be great. Cynthia says, when have we ever had a president try to have an unofficial holiday about raising taxes? That's a good point. He's probably going to talk for 2 hours. No, come on. You think he's going to talk for 2 hours? Nambi says, I'm looking for a new car. Guess I will pay $10,000 more for one after today. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's definitely going to go up. Julianne is back. He'll talk for 25 hours and 4 minutes to beat Cory Booker. Abe says, imagine Trump gives his speech and forgets to sign what he was going to sign. Oh, wait, this has happened before. Has that happened? I didn't even know that. What happened to lowering gas and grocery prices? Good question. Very good question. I've posted a message like 4 times, even a $10 super chat, and it never goes through. And why Trump wants to crash the economy. That's weird. I haven't seen it. The last donation was from Stefan. I don't see a donation from you, Fry, unfortunately. Rich says you watched Cory Booker for 11 straight hours. That's crazy. Booker is a real man, I can tell you. Yeah, if you've been watching my streams, you know I'm pro Cory Booker, so. What's on tap for Lichtman Live tomorrow? I don't know yet. Unless there's something big, we usually decide day of. Look at this. Who's this guy waving at? Philip H says prices won't go up instantly. Get a car in the next month and you'll be fine. Some economists we were watching earlier said the prices are going to go up the next day. Maybe it's not on everything. Maybe it's not on cars, but I don't know. That's what she said. Rich says maybe Cory Booker is the one with the spine. Maybe he is. I've been hyping up Cory Booker for a long time. Sam, did you see that Booker fasted from food and water since Friday so that he wouldn't have to use the restroom during the speech? That's crazy. He didn't have water for 24 hours. Fried Jemmy says, when the economy crashes, billionaire buddies can buy up everything super cheap. Yeah. Julianne says, I was really impressed by Booker's interview on David Pakman a while back. He's so clearly passionate and intelligent. I agree. TM wants Kamala for 2028. The president is late, guys. He's 3 minutes late. It's 4:03 on the East Coast. Andrew Robb says prices are going to go up immediately. Prices going up immediately. I think that depends on. Okay, let me rewind. Andrew Robb says prices going up immediately. I think that depends on the outlet. Doesn't mean that behind the scenes inflation will probably happen quite quickly, but will it be taken as a loss? Philip H says they've already bought stocks of cars knowing this would happen. If it raises the next day, the car dealers are ripping you off. All right. I hear that. Here he comes, I think. Everybody's standing like they just saw freaking Jesus. Julianne says, this is an unpleasant thing, but it's a pleasant thing to be here with you, Sam. It's a pleasant thing to be here with you, Julianne. Thank you. Thanks for joining me. I'm glad to be with you all on this Liberation Day. They're playing music. Fry says $10 bet he's more than 20 minutes late. I thought he was coming up. It looked like they all were standing for him. But maybe I'm wrong. I wonder how many times he's going to say Tesla. It's not a Trump presser if he's not 30 minutes late, right? Colin says, I still want to be able to import my Criterion movies from the USA. Damn, that sucks. Although I think I'm going to sell, I have a pretty big collection. I think I'm going to sell mine. Those diaper changes can take a while. Where am I from originally? I'm originally from the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. I see JD up there. Here he comes. Washington, D.C. is actually quite small. Washington, D.C. itself is small, but the Washington, D.C. metro area is quite large. Like if you count like the Northern Virginia, Maryland, D.C., it's a pretty big area. Fried Jeremy says, I'm about to win $10. Hell yeah. There he is. The orange man himself. Social Media says, it is pleasant to be watching this event with you while we are focused on listening to the guy to whom we did not vote. Yeah. I'd be surprised if any of us voted for him.
Thank you very much.
There's probably one or two people watching here that voted for him.
Nice crowd. What a good-looking group of people. Well, we have some very good news today, and a lot of good things are happening for our country. Please sit down. My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day. Waiting for a long time.
He looks extra orange today.
April 2nd, 2025 will forever be remembered as the day American industry was reborn, the day America's destiny was reclaimed, and the day that we began to make America wealthy again.
We're pretty wealthy.
Okay, good and wealthy. For decades, our country...
I don't think we need more wealth right now. We need more equality in wealth.
Friend and foe alike. American steel workers, auto workers, farmers, and skilled craftsmen. We have a lot of them here with us today. They really suffered gravely. They watched in anguish as foreign leaders have stolen our jobs, foreign cheaters have ransacked our factories, and foreign scavengers have torn apart our once beautiful American dream. We had an American dream that you don't hear so much about. You did 4 years ago, and you are now, but...
No, we didn't 4 years ago.
For many years and decades even, you didn't hear too much about. Our country and its taxpayers have been ripped off for more than 50 years, but it is not going to happen anymore. It's not going to happen.
Look, I think that line of rhetoric is effective for a lot of Americans. A lot of people eat that up.
Moments I will sign a historic executive order instituting reciprocal tariffs on countries throughout the world. Reciprocal. That means they do it to us and we do it to them. Very simple. Can't get any simpler than that. This is one of the most important days, in my opinion, in American history. It's our declaration of economic independence. For years, hardworking American citizens were forced to sit on the sidelines as other nations got rich and powerful, much of it at our expense. But now it's our turn to prosper, and in so doing, use trillions and trillions of dollars to reduce our taxes and pay down our national debt, and it'll all happen very quickly. With today's action, we are finally going to be able to make America great again, greater than ever before.
A lot of people are going to eat up this stuff. That's some rhetoric that a lot of people love. Thank you, Sharon.
Factories will come roaring back into our country, and you see it happening already. We will supercharge our domestic industrial base. We will pry open foreign markets and break down foreign trade barriers.
It just takes so much time and energy to explain away a lot of the really simple talking points that he has.
This will be indeed the golden age of America. It's coming back, and we're going to come back very strongly.
Again, he's trying to reverse the clock. I don't think that's a good strategy.
We're pleased to be joined on this momentous occasion by Vice President J.D. Vance. J.D., thank you.
Boo.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Where are you, J.D.? No, that wasn't too hard to find. I was looking, he likes to take a low-key attitude, so usually we sit right in front. He's gaining a lot of confidence, Mike, isn't he? And nearly my entire cabinet is here, as well
so
as
weird.
Speaker Mike Johnson, who's done an amazing job.
He hasn't done anything. How could he have done an amazing job? Everything you've done is through executive orders.
A majority of 7, and 7's like a lot when we had it at 1, right? You've done a fantastic job, and many of the members of the House and Senate are with us. Senators, congressmen, thank you all for being with us. We appreciate it. For decades, the United States slashed our trade barriers on other countries, while those nations placed massive tariffs on our products and created outrageous non-monetary barriers to decimate our industries. And in many cases, the non-monetary barriers were worse than the monetary ones. They manipulated their currencies, subsidized their exports, stole our intellectual property, imposed exorbitant VAT taxes to disadvantage.
I just started a quick donation goal. If you guys have the means, I'd appreciate a donation.
Filthy pollution havens. They were absolutely filthy, but they always came to us and they said, we're violating, we should pay for it. It's all detailed in a very big report by the U.S. Trade Representative on foreign trade barriers, and I'll just hold it up for you. It's available, and you don't have to pay too much. As I understand it, you'll pay nothing. It's a lot of work for something, actually, because it's a special book. It's very,
what is
frankly,
that?
It's very upsetting when you read it, when you see what people have been doing to us for 30 years. This all happened with no response from the United States of America, none whatsoever. But those days are over. Let me offer just a few examples of the vicious attacks our workers have faced for so many years.
Oh, yeah, you're really pro-worker.
Charges other countries only a 2.4 tariff on motorcycles. Meanwhile, Thailand and others are charging much higher.
He said Thailand. He corrected himself, but he did say Thai.
Vietnam charges 75%, and others are even higher than that. Likewise, until today, the United States has for decades charged a 2.5 tariff. Think of that, 2.5% on foreign-made automobiles. The European Union charges us more than 10% tariffs, and they have 20% VATs, much, much higher. India charges 70%, and perhaps worst of all are the non-monetary restrictions imposed by South Korea, Japan, and very many other nations. As a result of these colossal trade barriers, 81% of the cars in South Korea are made in South Korea. 94% of the cars in Japan are made in Japan. Toyota sells 1 million foreign-made automobiles into the United States, and General Motors sells almost none. Ford sells very little. None of our companies are allowed to go into other countries. And I say that, friend and foe. And in many cases, the friend is worse than the foe in terms of trade. But such horrendous...
Calm down, dude. This is like, let's trade with Russia.
Security at risk. I don't blame these other countries at all for this calamity. I blame former presidents and past leaders who weren't doing their job. They let it happen, and they let it happen to an extent that nobody can even believe. That's why, effective at midnight, we will impose a 25% tariff on all foreign-made automobiles.
Yolanda, thank you for your donation.
Thank you.
Yolanda says it's causing us non-Americans to question who our allies really are.
Okay. I just see him sitting. He's been a fan of ours, and he understands this business a lot better than the economists, a lot better than...
Cohen says, we Europeans don't buy American cars because they're inferior. Look, I don't know if I can argue with that. Thank you, Julianne, for your donation. Search says, my Subaru is 85% Japanese.
Be the best president I ever saw in my lifetime until Donald J. Trump came along.
Those are weird
I have
clap.
watched my entire life. I have watched plant after plant after plant in Detroit and in the metro Detroit area close. There are now plants sitting idle. There are now plants that are underutilized. And Donald Trump's policies are going to bring product back into those underutilized plants. There's going to be new investment. There's going to be new plants built. And the UAW members, and I brought 20 of them with me, they're sitting right over here. We support Donald Trump's policies on tariffs 100%. So, Mr. President, we can't thank you enough. And in 6 months or a year, we're going to begin to see the benefits. I can't wait to see what's happening 3 or 4 years down the road. Thank you, Mr. President.
What a great guy. He got it right from the beginning. He got it before almost anybody else. This group over there, they got it too. And you know, we won the state of Michigan. We won almost all of them, but we won Michigan by a lot. And I want to just thank you all. The auto workers were fantastic. The Teamsters were fantastic. Everyone was.
Jake Milano says he's not wrong that our automobile industry got exported to places like Korea and Japan, but every other president saw this as a natural consequence of free trade that couldn't be avoided. Trump disagrees. Right. I think that sums it up pretty well.
All of the ones they're moving, they're announcing day in, day out.
Is he right? I guess we'll see.
Anything like that. With today's actions, we're also standing up for our great.
Ian says new plants built and run by AI and robotics, though. That's a good point, too.
Canada, by the way, imposes a 250 to 300% tariff on many of our dairy products. They do the first can of milk. They do the first little carton of milk at a very low price, but after that it gets bad, and then it gets up to 275, 300%. So when they're figuring what's Canada charging, they say, oh, about 2%, 3%. But take a look at what happens down the road. When you look a little bit, it's not a pretty picture, and we don't like it, and it's not fair. It's not fair to our farmers. It's not fair to our country. And with countries like Canada, you know, we subsidize a lot of countries and keep them going and keep them in business. In the case of Mexico, it's $300 billion a year. In the case of Canada, it's close to $200 billion a year. And I say, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? I mean, at what point do we...
What is he talking about exactly?
Work for yourselves, and you got to... This is why we have the big deficits. This is why we have that...
An ad.
Most American poultry, you understand? They say, we want to send you our cars, we want to send you everything, but we're not going to take anything that you have. Australia bans, and they're wonderful people and wonderful everything, but they ban American beef, yet we imported $3 billion of Australian beef from them just last year alone. They won't take any of our beef. They don't want it because they don't want it to affect their farmers. And you know what? I don't blame them, but we're doing the same thing right now, starting about midnight tonight, I would say.
But he should be more strategic with his tariffs, if anything.
American rice farmers an overquota, it's called, a tariff rate of 65%. South Korea charges 50. Actually, they charge different, from 50% to 513%. And
no way.
A friend charges us 700%, but that's because they don't want us selling rice and other thing. Who can blame them, Madam Secretary?
700%? That can't be real.
On 50%. You got them down 50%. Once we got involved, they were going through the sky. The egg prices, they were going through the sky, and you did a fantastic job. Now we have lots of eggs, and they're much cheaper, down about 59% now, and they're going down further.
That can't be true.
We charge 2.8% for so many things that other countries are charging 200%, 300%, and 400% for. If imposing tariffs and protective barriers made nations poor, then every country on earth would be racing to eliminate these policies, and China would be the first online. They run a...
I think the point is that they're strategic tariffs. They don't tariff everything from the U.S. like he's trying to do.
Paying a very big price. From 1789 to 1913, we were a tariff-backed nation, and the United States was proportionately the wealthiest it has ever been. So wealthy, in fact, that in the 1880s, They established a commission to decide
It's not the 1880s anymore, bro.
sums of money they were collecting. We were collecting so much money so fast we didn't know what to do.
Julianne says, it's just not possible for one country to specialize in everything. We need other countries. We're all interconnected. It's not possible to be as isolationist like in every way. I agree with you, Julianne.
We'll tell you. But they collected so much money, they actually formed a commission to determine what they were going to do with the money, who they were going to...
Eggs might be down in certain places, up in certain places. They're definitely not down 59%. There's no way that's true.
Income tax so that citizens, rather than foreign countries, would start paying the money necessary to run our government. Then in 1929, it all came to a very abrupt end with the Great Depression, and it would have never happened if they had stayed with the tariff policy. It would have been a much different story.
They brought
tried
back
to
tariffs.
bring back tariffs to save our country, but it was gone. It was gone. It was too late. Nothing
too
could
late.
have
Right.
been done. It took years and years to get out of that depression, far longer than even FDR had that office right over there for a long period of time. The ramp system.
Cynthia says, completely false. We got rid of the Articles of Confederation because we were so financially strapped.
Job in many ways, but it lasted long beyond his terms, as you know. But it's not too late any longer, and we're going to start being smart, and we're going to start being very wealthy again. We're going to be wealthy as a country because if...
I mean, this guy's talking about the economy from the 1700s. I mean, come on. Earlier, I was critical of people using Smoot-Hawley as an example, and now he's using the economy from the 18 and 1700s as an example.
A century later, in the face of unrelenting economic warfare, the United States can no longer continue with a policy of unilateral economic surrender. We cannot pay the deficits of Canada, Mexico, and so many other countries. We used to do it. We can't do it anymore. We take care of countries all over the world. We pay for their military. We pay for everything they have to pay, and then...
George says, in the 1880s, when we placed tariffs on Europe and Europe placed counter tariffs, it disproportionately affected southern states, hence less development. Thank you for that info, George.
And today we're standing up for the American worker, and we are finally putting America first.
Trump does not stand up for the American worker. I'm sorry.
In Sleepy Joe Biden's last year in office, the United States hemorrhaged 100,000 manufacturing jobs, and the number was going through the roof at levels never seen before. And our trade deficit reached a record $1.2 trillion, which is unheard of. Since the beginning of NAFTA, the worst.
What was it under your first term?
I was able to terminate it. They all said you'd never be able to get it out. We had to get approval from Congress to get it terminated. We had to live with that deal. It was the worst trade deal ever made by far. But since the very beginning of NAFTA, our country lost 90,000 factories. Think of what that is, 90,000. Think about putting a map up and putting tax on it. You wouldn't have enough room. 90,000. I said, is that possible? We had it checked 4 different times, and it was actually somewhat higher than that.
Trump the fact checker, baby.
Were lost while racking up trade deficits of $19 trillion. That was the worst trade deal ever made.
This dude is just saying random shit at this point.
Now own $26 trillion more of American assets than think of this, than the Americans own of their own foreign assets or other foreign assets. The United States can no longer produce enough antibiotics to end this problem. We have to go to foreign countries to treat our sick. If anything ever happened from a war standpoint, we wouldn't be able to do it. We import virtually all of.
I kind of agree with that it is weird that we get all of our medication from other countries.
Import it all from different countries. A single shipyard in China now produces more ships every year than all of the American shipyards combined. Think of that. And it was a business that we used to dominate. We used to dominate it totally. In short, chronic trade deficits are no longer merely an economic problem. They're a national emergency that threatens our security and our very way of life. It's a very great threat to our country. And for these reasons, starting tomorrow, the United States will implement reciprocal.
Douglas says that's such a load of crap. NAFTA was literally one of the best free trade agreements that helped both the U.S., Canada, and Mexico.
Think about it a lot. We didn't think about it for many decades, and you see what's happened. For nations that treat us badly, we will calculate the combined rate of all their tariffs, non-monetary barriers, and other forms of cheating. And because we are being very kind, we're kind people, very kind. You're not so kind when you got ripped off with your salaries. My auto worker friends and my Teamster friends and all of the unions that typically voted Democrat, they're not voting Democrat anymore because worker, whether union or non-worker, they're for the Republicans now.
You haven't done Jack SHIT for unions.
Half of what they are and have been charging us. So the tariffs will be not a full reciprocal. I could have done that, yes, but it would have been tough for a lot of countries who didn't want to do that. I'd like to see the chart if you have it. Could you bring it up, Howard? This is our great Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick. Thanks, Howard.
Luddy.
So if you look at that, China, first row, China, 67%. That's tariffs charged to the USA, including currency manipulation and trade barriers. So 67%, I think you can, for the most part, see it. Those with good eyes, with bad eyes. We didn't want to bring, it's very windy out here. We didn't want to bring out the big charts because it had no chance of standing. Fortunately, we came armed with a little smaller chart.
Sometimes Trump is funny, man.
So we're going to be charging a discount.
No big charts, because the wind's going to blow all the charts over. Only small charts today, folks.
So how can anybody be upset? They will be because we never charge anybody anything. But now we're going to charge. European Union, they're very tough, very, very tough traders. You know, you think of European Union, very friendly. They rip us off. It's so sad to see. It's so pathetic. 39%, we're going to charge them 20%, so we're charging them essentially half. Vietnam, great negotiators, great people. They like me, I like them. The problem is they charge us 90%. We're going to charge them 46% tax.
Can we get can anybody fact check these numbers? Vietnam, 90% on what though exactly? On everything? I feel like this is a misleading chart. Maybe there are some products that Vietnam charges 90% on, but not everything.
To get their approvals. And
Raymond says, Sam, the issue on medication is Big Pharma can make drugs in the U.S. because of liability laws and lawsuits against the companies. Well, I don't know what to say about that.
4%, we're going to charge them 32%. Japan, very, very tough. Great people. And again, I don't blame the people for doing it. I think they're very smart in doing it. I blame the people that said.
The second column is what we're going to charge them back. But I'm pretty sure ours are blanket tariffs, and I don't think Vietnam is charging us blanket 90% tariffs. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
You know, little items like cars. 46%, we're charging them 24%. India, very, very tough. Very, very tough. The Prime Minister just left, and he's a great friend of mine, but I said, you're a friend of mine, but you're not treating us right. They charge us 52%. You have to understand, we charge them almost nothing for years and years and decades. And it was only 7 years ago when I came in, we started with China and charged them. We took in hundreds of billions of dollars from China in tariffs. And they understood, honestly. President Xi understood. He said, look, I understand. And the other
yes, blanket as in to cover all.
Tough love, maybe. But they all understand. They're ripping us off, and they understood it. Prime Minister.
He's not going to go one by one through every one of these countries and go, Thailand, very tough. I love the Thai people, but very tough. They charge us this much. Switzerland, beautiful country. Love Switzerland. Very rich, a lot of gold.
He said, I know that. I know that. And he was a great gentleman. He was a fantastic man, but he understood immediately.
Jake says we get all our clothes from Vietnam because China uses it to get around the tariffs we put on them. Interesting. Importing goods from Vietnam to the U.S. involves tariffs that varies based on the product category with rates ranging from 0 to 25%. Thanks for fact checking, Nambi. I don't know where they're getting this 90% number.
We're going to bring it down to 49. They made a fortune with the United States of America. United Kingdom, 10%, and we'll go 10%. So we'll do the same thing. South Africa, 60%, 30%, and they've got some bad things going on in South Africa. You know, we're paying them billions of dollars, and we cut the funding because a lot of bad things are happening in South Africa. The fake news ought to be looking at it. They don't want to report it.
George says the highest tariffs from the U.S. to Vietnam are bikes and e-bikes from 45% to 55%. Rich, you're saying this is all a lie?
Sri Lanka, 88%. So what we're doing is we're taking not the full, we could take the full 88%. Thanks a lot, Aaron. He's doing a very good job. How's he doing, all right?
Rich, he said 700% earlier. He did say, I think he was talking about a specific product, but I don't know. These numbers are all over the place.
I brought a hat just in case it got too windy, but here, would anybody like a hat? I'm not giving it to a cabinet. I'm giving it to the auto workers. Come here.
Douglas said, yes, they made a fortune on us, and so did we. Free trade benefits both parties.
That's it. They deserve it more than our cabinet.
Tony says this BS is getting deep. I don't know where those numbers were coming from exactly, especially on that chart.
So unfair. At the same time, we will establish a minimum baseline tariff of 10%. You notice that on the chart? And that'll be on other countries to help rebuild our economy.
On everything imported into the United States?
Minimum of cheating, and we're going to be very severe on the people that at the gate that watch the tariffs and watch the product coming in, because there's been a lot of bad things happening at the gate because the money is so enormous that you're talking about. There's never been probably anything like it in terms of the enormity, and there are a lot of bad things happen at the people that do the check-in, and they're looking at 10-year jail sentences if they do play. We're going to treat them so good, but if they cheat, the repercussions are going to be extremely strong. Foreign nations will finally be asked to pay for the privilege of access to our market, the biggest market in the world. We're right now the biggest market in the world. We had a great country 4 years ago in terms of the economics. We were doubling up on China. We were doing so well. Nobody was going to catch us, but so much of it slipped away over the last 4 years under Biden. I campaigned on this policy throughout last year, and today that promise was made, and it was also a promise, as you know, that was kept. Promises made, promises kept. To any company that objects to our common sense research.
Julianne says, what's sad is he takes a theoretically good idea and exploits and ruins it. Like it's not inherently a bad consideration to think how we can profit more from our own goods, but not in this way. Very well put.
We cut it in half. We charge them. My answer is very simple. If they complain, if you want your tariff rate to be zero, then you build your product right here in America, because there is no tariff if you build your plant, your product in America. And we've seen companies coming in like we've never seen before. Likewise to all of the foreign presidents, prime ministers, kings, queens, ambassadors, and everyone else who will soon be calling to ask for exemptions from these tariffs. I say, terminate your own tariffs, drop your barriers, don't manipulate your currencies. They manipulate their currencies like nobody can even believe, which is a bad, bad thing and very devastating to us. And start buying tens of billions of dollars of American goods. Tariffs give our country protection against those that would do us economic harm. And many people were looking to do us economic harm. Maybe not so obviously, but they were doing tremendous economic harm. But even more importantly, they will give us growth. These tariffs are going to give us growth like you haven't seen before. And it'll be something very special to watch. I am so looking forward. And Brian, it's going to happen even faster than you said. You know, you might say, but it's already started. It's already started. Work's already begun on plants all around the country. And you see that as before. These are big, rich companies. We have $61 billion started on a big plant going up. It's going to be announced over the next 2 days, and they already started work. Many of these the biggest companies in the world, they've committed to build, build, build. We're going to build, 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 sir. And they came here to see me, and wanted to know if they could have a press conference. I do as many as I can. I'm pretty busy trying to stop Russia and Ukraine and the Middle East. We got to stop that. We got to stop the Houthis, which we're making tremendous. They like shooting ships down and out of the water, sinking ships. They get a kick out of it, but they're not getting such a kick out of it now, are they, Mr. Secretary? They're not getting such a kick out of that now. But here are just a short list of some of the companies that have already announced and committed to investment. And this is a company that built its factories and its plants in China. Apple is going to spend $500 billion. They never spent money like that here. They're going to build their plants here. SoftBank, OpenAI, and Oracle, great companies, are investing $500 billion almost immediately. NVIDIA, a hot company, is investing hundreds of billions of dollars. They just announced. TSMC, the biggest, most important company in the world of chips from Taiwan, with no investment from us, is investing $200 billion. And they said the reason was, number one, the election of November 5th, and number two, the tariffs. They don't want to pay the tariffs, and the way they're not paying it is to their plant here. So we're going to go from almost no percentage. We used to have 100% of the chip market. Now it's all in Taiwan. Almost all of it's in Taiwan, a couple of other countries, but mostly in Taiwan. And think of it, we had 100%. We lost it because of people in that office that didn't do their job. They allowed it to be stolen from us. Johnson & Johnson, great company, $55 billion. Eli Lilly, $27 billion. Meta is investing $500 billion. Wow. DeMac is investing $20 billion. CMA, CGM, $20 billion. And then you have Merck and Clarios.
This is definitely the corporate president for sure.
Nissan, Hyundai are all putting in billions and billions of dollars, and they're committed 100%. So. And we've never had, and this is after 2.5 months. This is after just a short, this all took place as soon as we came out with what everybody wanted to do. You know, I watched a gentleman today on television, used to work with Lee Iacocca, a very respected automobile person, and he said, you know, because they're asking people, and they try and get as many negative people as they can, but they can't find them too much. It's pretty hard to find in terms of what we're doing, especially when they see all this investment. They said, so tell me, what do you think of what Trump is doing from the automobile standpoint? He said, I can't believe it. Somebody is finally, he's an older guy, real pro.
Got to stand up for a second.
Really top guy with Lee Iacocca. He said, I never thought I'd see the day when this would happen, where somebody had the courage to go and do what has to.
This guy, he's just rambling, man.
Our nation, our entire nation is going to be transformed, not only with the cars, but on every single other item that's built. We're going to become an industrial powerhouse. And he said that so beautifully today. In fact, I'm going to find out, I'm going to get a tape, and Bruce, I'm going to get that tape, and I'm going to send it to you out in Long Island, and you're going to play it for the people and all your union workers and your non-union workers out there. You got a pretty even split. But we have, so far, it looks like we're going to have about $6 trillion of investments, and you wouldn't do that in years in this country over the last.
I'd like to know more details about that investment. I mean, he's just throwing out numbers. Meta, 500 billion. Apple, 300 trillion, gajillion.
Under this other system, we're going to be an entirely different country, and it's going to be fantastic for the workers. It's going to be fantastic for everyone. There will never have been a transformation of a country like the transformation that's already happening in the United States of America. It's an incredible thing to watch, and it's incredible to meet with the top people, people that you read about, very wealthy people, or people that are great managers and executives and presidents of big public companies, and to watch the enthusiasm they have now that they didn't have. They gave up on our country. They went to foreign countries and they built. Companies are pouring into our country at levels never seen before, with jobs and money to follow, and it's really beautiful. In the coming days, there will be complaints from the globalists and the outsourcers and special interests.
The globalists.
And the fake news. Always, the fake news will always complain. But never forget, every prediction our opponents made about trade for the last 30 years has been proven totally wrong. They were wrong about NAFTA.
Every single trade.
They were wrong about China.
Every single prediction
They were wrong
was wrong.
about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which would have been a disaster if I didn't terminate it. If I didn't terminate that, United Auto Workers, you would have had no jobs in this country. You would have had no jobs.
The blood flowing.
It was all going to other countries. In my first term, they said tariffs would crash the economy. Instead, we built the greatest economy in the history of the world. And again,
Did you really?
I have great respect for President Xi of China, great respect for China, but they were taking tremendous advantage of us, and I commend them for that. I say, hey, if you can get away with it, that's okay. But, they understand exactly what's happening, and they probably, most of them are saying it's about time they did something, but, and they're going to fight, and they're going to fight fair. Everyone's going to fight. It's like, I say to the leaders, look, you got to take care of your country, but we have to start taking care of our country now. We can't do what we've been doing for the last 50 years. From the day of my election, the stock market went up in my first term 88%, with NASDAQ going up 155%, more than any president has ever had in any term in office, by far.
Right, but what about now?
And I think we're going to blow that away. And maybe the numbers won't show, but I think they're going to show much better than even those numbers. But what you're going to see is you're going to see activity, that empty, dead sites, factories that are falling down. Those factories will be knocked down, and they're going to have brand new factories built in their place. They're not only talking about renovating, they're talking about brand new, the best anywhere in the world, the biggest anywhere in the world. I have a friend who builds car plants, and I said, I want to see the biggest and the best. He said, well, we have to go to...
If Trump was really pro-manufacturing, he would be pushing green energy, because green energy is one of the ways that we can bring back manufacturing to the United States. Think about making Detroit the solar panel manufacturing capital of the world. Think about that.
In the first hour, and then shortly thereafter, it looked like I was going to win, and the fake news was saying, oh, no, don't do this. What they don't know is if I didn't win, they would have really been in trouble, because nobody wants to read them anyway. But I tell you what, when it looked like I was going to win, I announced that I was going to be doing exactly what we're talking about today. Great consistency, actually, because I've been talking about it for 40 years, but because I saw what was happening 40 years ago. If you look at my old speeches when I was young, very handsome.
Chill, bro. You were never very handsome.
On a television show, I'd be talking about how we were being ripped off by these countries. I mean, nothing changes very much. The only thing that changed was...
Adrian says, I don't feel liberated at all. I don't feel that liberated either, to be honest with you.
It's an honor to be finally able to do this. If you look at China, I took in hundreds of billions of dollars in my term. Hundreds of billions. They never paid 10 cents.
Here's an interesting point. Today is supposed to be Liberation Day, April 2nd, but he said his tariffs aren't going into effect until midnight, which is April 3rd. So really Liberation Day is April 3rd. The administration's got it all mixed up.
We're so big. The numbers were...
Have you ever seen the documentary American Factory? I have seen it, yes.
Things that they shouldn't have done. They made it a lot more comfortable for them, but they couldn't do it because the numbers were hundreds of billions of dollars, and I did that. And we were on our way to doing something.
God, this guy's such a bad public speaker. He just rambles and goes off topic and turns right on this tangent and left on that tangent. Holy moly.
Too big to rig, and we won in records, and it was a monumental win. And it was such an honor to see so many of you, like Brian and your friends, here with us to celebrate, and to more importantly celebrate what we're doing, because that wouldn't be a full celebration if we didn't do this, because this will be an entirely different country.
They should have had the tariffs go into effect at 11:59, because then they would have been consistent. April 2nd, tariff day. Now tariff day is 2 days. Now I'm confused.
Dropped to the lowest rate in 4 years, and the price of eggs, as you know, just in a month and a half, we were there for 4 weeks. And the first week, I got blamed for eggs. I said, I just got here. They said eggs have gone up at like 250%, and you can't get eggs. And they were going crazy.
Right, but you said on day one you were going to lower the egg prices. Day one. Now you're saying 4 weeks is too soon. What is it, bro?
Secretary of Agriculture, you did a fantastic job. Brooke Rollins, she did a fantastic job. And as I said before, the price of eggs dropped now 59%, and they're going down more, and the availability is fantastic. They were saying that for Easter, please don't use eggs. Could you use plastic eggs? I said, we don't want to do that. We want to, and you really came through. It's an amazing job. Thank you very much, Brooke. You did great. But likewise, an old-fashioned term that we use, groceries. I used it on the campaign. It's such an old-fashioned term, but a beautiful term, groceries. It sort of says a bag with different things in it. Groceries went through the roof, and I campaigned on that. I talked about the word groceries for a lot, and energy costs now are down. Groceries are down. Gasoline is way under $3, and people are beginning to be able to buy things and live again. We brought prices way down. We created 10,000 already in a few weeks, new manufacturing jobs. And it was that took place in 1 month, numbers that they haven't seen in a long time. We had virtually no inflation under my term. We had virtually no inflation for 4 years. But
so in early February, they were $5.90. And now they're at $3. So, I mean, that's not even 50%. I mean, it is a pretty big drop, but it's not even 50%. So it's definitely not 59%, right?
Noam and Tom Homan. These people are doing a great job, but gotten them out in records. We have problems with judges that don't want them to go out. They want Tren de Aragua, and they want MS-13, the most vicious gangs ever. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. Absolute killer gangs. They kill people. They don't even think about it. And we put them out, and we have judges now, radical left judges that want to, they don't want them to go out. They want them to even be brought back. Let's bring them back. You've done a fantastic job, and please thank everybody.
We just don't want innocent people being sent to a horrific El Salvadorian jail. I think that's the main thing.
Best border that we've ever had, even better than it was my first term. My first term we did good, but this one we really specialized in. We've done really well, and we had records then. We had the best, safest border 4 years ago. We had the best border there ever was, and now we have. You've actually matched it and done even better, and we're going to get it down the right way. And we want people, by the way, to come into our country, but we want them to come in through a legal process.
I think it's been proven that you have sent people who came in through a legal process to a El Salvadorian jail. So,
non-union people and everybody else, but we need people and the farmers. And we're going to let people come in, but they want to come in. We want them to come in legally. They have to have the capability of loving our country, not people that hate our country. We don't want them in our country. And now we're going to pass the largest tax cuts in American history, and that's where we're relying on Mike and John Thune.
Tax cuts for the rich homies.
Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid benefits, and the Democrats will, because if they got in, the entire economy would collapse. This country was heading for a collapse under the people that you saw. They were horrible. I think one of the reasons people like the job, I have my highest approval ratings because I think they're comparing me to the worst administration in the history of our country, so I appreciate that at least. But Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, and Senate Majority Leader, appreciate it, Mike. John Thune have been fantastic, by the way. But they've been working tirelessly on taking the next step to pass the plan for our one big, beautiful bill. I'd like to name it that if you can. One big, beautiful. I made that statement about 6 months ago, and everybody calls it one big, beautiful bill. And it will be that. It'll have everything, the big tax cuts and every incentive there is. And it'll be fantastic. And by the way, for the cars, we're asking for an interest deduction on a loan. So if you build the car, only in America we do it, Brian. If the car's not built in America, you don't get the interest rate deduction. But if you build the car in America, if you buy a car, if it's built in America, then you get an interest rate deduction, tax deduction, and that's a big thing. That's going to be a big thing. I think that's going to pay for itself very quickly, that deduction. Never happened. We've never had anything like that before. Somebody said, where do you get the idea? Because it's so basic. You would think that would have happened a long time ago. It never did, and I'm very happy it didn't, because now I can say that was my idea. But we're going to get us closer to the debt extension. We have to get the debt extension passed, and I know you're going to be able to do that, Mike, and it's very important that you do that. And all of the other things that the Senate budget plan gives us, along with working, because I know they're working together, John and Mike, and the two bills are going.
Get to be over, bro. We get it. The speech should be over by now.
Cuts to be permanent, spending cuts, energy and historic investments in defense, border, and so much more. We're covering everything. These will be phenomenal. There'll be no bill like this going to straighten. One bill is going to straighten out our country for many, many years to come.
That seems totally believable. One magic bill. One magic bill is gonna save our country. Sorry, that was not a very good jingle.
They'll never, if we get this done, it'll be the most incredible bill ever passed in the history of our Congress and Senate and congressmen, the senators and the congressmen, many of whom are here today, will be very proud of themselves. I really believe that. It's going to set us.
We need to look at it. Who fact checks him instantly? Like, does anybody know or can send me when he's done if there's some sort of big fact check sheet? I need to read that.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, John. Thank you. Oh, look at all.
Why does he dove this in every speech he ever does? He goes around and, points to people and thanks, Rick. Thanks, Chris. Like, bro, do you have to do this in every speech? CNN does fact checking.
Plan likewise is very similar. They're moving along pretty much at the same clip, and as soon as you're ready, you'll show it to me, and I'm sure it'll have my support, Mike. Every Republican congressman and senator must unify. We have to unify. We can't be separated. We have to get it done. We have to get absolutely everything we can, and we have to take care of the American people. That's the only thing that matters. We have to take care of the American people first. We need to pass this bill immediately, get it done, including debt extension. From this day on, we're not going to let anyone tell us that American workers and families cannot have the future that they deserve. We're going to produce the cars and ships, chips, airplanes, minerals, and medicines that we need right here. And
I couldn't find anything on CNN. Maybe it'll come out afterwards.
Roaring back. They're coming roaring back. They're all coming back to our country, because if they don't, they got a big tax to pay.
Okay, if someone has... Remember, someone usually does a live fact checking online. Can you send that to me, TM, somehow? Email it to me.
Build it with American pride like we used to. We're approaching our 100th day as president and have been given credit by a lot of people, actually, even some of the fake news. Can you believe it? Which in this case, hopefully, isn't fake, for having done more in that time than any other administration in the history of our country in the first 100 days. I think we've had an amazing, in terms of what we've done, what we've gotten accomplished. I'd like to see if we can get that war ended and another war from not starting in the Middle East. We have to get Russia. They're losing 2,000 on average, 2,500 people a day, young people, soldiers, Russian. Think of that. 2,500 through some days, but on average, probably over about a 1 week period, it's 2,712, they say. They're losing those soldiers. They're dying. They're being decimated.
Bad.
And they're not from our country, but they're from other countries, but they're human beings. They're from Russia. They're from Ukraine in this period, most of them. And we're going to get it stopped. It's a senseless war that would have never happened if I was president, and it shouldn't be allowed to.
Sure.
And I think we're being given good cooperation by Russia and by Ukraine, but we have to get it stopped. It's humanity. It's a terrible thing. This will be a very big moment. I think you're going to remember today. It's going to be a free nation that we're dealing with. We're going to have a very free and beautiful nation. It's going to be Liberation Day in America, and it's going to be a day that hopefully you're going to look back in years to come and you're going to say, you know, he was right. This has turned out to be one of the most important days in the history of our country. God bless you and God bless America. Thank you, everybody.
Thank God it's
Thank you
over.
very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Anybody got a fact check for me?
Good afternoon, y'all. We have two documents prepared for the president's signature today. One closes what's referred to as the de minimis loophole with respect to imports from the
Not even Hail Mary. Adrian says the real liberation was him ending the speech. Facts.
The president just spoke about at length. This is obviously a huge deal, and it's been an honor to be part of your team getting started.
You know, I honestly believe that part of the reason of Trump's success is the social media era, because he's very good at certain talking points and he's very good if you watch him for like 20 seconds. But if you ever actually sit down and watch his speech and watch his public speaking, he's terrible. I don't know what he just signed exactly. He looks extra orange today. Why does he need 12 Sharpies? Nam B says he has no clue how normal Americans live. I agree with that.
Mr. President, what will you do if the EU or other countries retaliate?
I need a fact check, guys.
All right, there you have it, live from the Rose Garden. That was President Trump as he announced the slew of tariffs that now will go into effect. And Caroline Leavitt, of course, the spokesperson for the White House, saying that they will go into effect, quote unquote, immediately. If you
when they agreed that there would be a conversation that begins after this election on the larger conversation, the renegotiation of the trade.
Come on, guys, give me a fact. Fact check Trump's, what is this called again? Independence Day. What the heck? Liberation Day. I forgot for a second. Liberation Day speech. I guess the markets are closed, right? Let's see if this has anything. I don't know. What's Bazinga?
Some of our trading partners, you see reciprocals half in some cases of what they're tariffing the U.S. But Scott Bessent was also right as well, saying we're going to start at a high level and then potentially pull things back when we see concessions. Is that going to be the story in the days ahead?
I think in part, but I also think this is so wide-ranging that part of the story is going to be how this impacts the global economy and whether or not it really does reignite inflation. The administration has said we have other things in place like energy initiatives and things like that that will counter effect some of the impact of the tariffs. But we've talked to a lot of economists, and certainly the Fed is watching this very closely in terms of whether or not we'll see sustained inflation or even higher inflation, which is something that the economy has been battling since the COVID pandemic.
Well, and this is all just as we try to assess the economic impact of the tariffs the U.S. is charging.
Like Europe. But today we saw that China and other countries in Asia, including India, are certainly impacted. So we'll see some reaction from some of the countries that we've been talking and reporting a lot about, Canada, Mexico.
Oh, the S&P after hours already dropped a little bit.
Also, the administration has said from the beginning that it sees tariffs as a revenue raiser. So that will be another thing to really watch. Like, is this something that really does raise a lot of revenue and therefore allow the administration to follow through with some of its tax cuts, which are coming around the bend, as we know very well in Washington?
If Secretary Bessent is correct and some of these levies may come down if countries respond accordingly, are we going to have a parade of world leaders through the West Wing in the days ahead?
Well, I think we've seen a parade of world leaders since November who are going to Mar-a-Lago and to Washington. So I think that will certainly continue. Companies that are affected, of course, the auto industry is one that our team's been reporting on, and we'll continue to follow the impact on the auto industry and auto sales. And we have jobs numbers coming out on Fridays, and Powell speaking in the afternoon, so more to come.
Bloomberg's Washington Bureau Chief Peggy Collins with breaking news here from the White House on tariffs. Thank you, Peggy, for the insights. President Trump sharing remarks as we just brought for you, and we turn now to potential reaction from Canada to this afternoon's announcement. Doug Ford, the Ontario Premier, is with us now on Bloomberg TV and radio. It's great to have you with us, Mr. Ford. You've called this Termination Day instead of Liberation Day. What will be the response now from Canada?
Well, let's see where these tariffs go. I'm cautiously optimistic that I never saw Canada or Mexico on that list, and it just goes to show you two great countries working together, collaborating together, and building relationships. So it's again, I'm cautiously optimistic. I think it's if that's the case, it's the right thing for both the U.S. and Canada.
Well, and considering Canada was not on that list, we understand the existing regime is in place, so the tariffs that are in place with the exemption of goods that are USMCA compliant. Does that mean, sir, at least in your mind, that it wouldn't be appropriate for Canada to retaliate for this at this time?
That is correct. If that's the case,
just because they weren't on that the chart that he was holding.
not to retaliate. And let's carry on a strong relationship. Let's build the AMCAN fortress, American-Canadian fortress, around both countries and be the wealthiest, most prosperous, safest two countries in the world.
You've suggested that Canada would bring down its tariffs if the United States did the same. Does this turn into a game of chicken? Do you believe that the White House would respond accordingly?
Well, I hope so. We're neighbors for the last 200 years, and when we show good faith, or the U.S. shows good faith, you have to follow. This is a partnership that's going to go on for hopefully several hundred more years and decades to come, and we have bigger concerns, both Canada and the U.S., than each other. We have to keep an eye on other countries like China.
Who makes the first move in a game like that?
Well, we'll work collaboratively with the administration and with our prime minister, and he'll be speaking to President Trump, I'm sure, over the next day or so, and we'll be working with Secretary Lutnick and to get a clear picture of what this means for Canada.
What about what it means for the auto sector in particular? Because, of course, we learned last week that the president would announce what he made final today, which is that 25% tariffs on auto imports will be going into place. Obviously, parts are going to be included in that eventually, sir. So what impact do you expect that alone will have, even if tariffs on or reciprocal tariffs were not applied to Canada today?
Well, I just hope there's no tariffs on auto, because parts go back and forth across the border 7-8 times before they get assembled either.
What does he mean? He hopes there's no. He just announced it. I mean, I guess he could still take it back, but.
And has worked since 1965. I've always said you can't unscramble an egg that's been around since 1965. You have to make the omelet larger. And we're just so much stronger together. We buy as many vehicles as we sell down there. And the ones that we ship to the U.S., 50% of that automobile is U.S. parts. So I think the system is working. It's working well for both countries. And it's a great system, especially Canada's buying 400% more vehicles off the U.S. than Mexico does, 200% more than any other country in the world. We have an incredible relationship with the two great countries.
So this is obviously just about footwear, but it says the average U.S. tariff rate on footwear from Vietnam is 13.6%, while the rate on apparel is 18.8%. So where is he getting numbers like? In the chart he provided, he said that he just said Vietnam, and then he said the tariff rate was 90%. I guess maybe he caveated it. He said it also includes certain trade barriers and stuff like that, but I don't know. It seems sketchy as hell.
As opposed to the American people, suggesting that you're looking to reset our trade relationship here on a more positive level, maybe in a post-tariff world.
Even if you were to add like trade barriers and stuff like that, I don't know, 90% on motorcycles. So he just picked the highest tariff rate possible and just added that to the chart. Is that what we're thinking?
The issues, we may go back and forth. It's no different than family members around the table. You may disagree, but at the end of the day, you come out united and stronger than ever before. Because again, there's a lot of people that don't see eye to eye with the U.S. and Canada, and especially how close we are.
It says here that there's a 45% tariff on U.S. bikes and a 55% on bikes. Again, where is he getting this 90%? Again, they did say it includes other stuff too, whatever the hell that means. They're just trying to muddy the waters as much as possible and make those numbers look as big as humanly possible.
A very good.
Add them together now. You're saying it was total tariffs on different products added together? I mean, that doesn't make any sense.
And Canadian jobs as well. But again, we're so integrated, everything from travel to, commerce and everything in between.
55 plus 45, that's how he's muddying it. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it still doesn't make any sense.
Here, or will it be by the provinces? Is this something that you've discussed with the Prime Minister?
That chart is misleading, I would say, to say the least. Because he was also adding extra stuff to the foreign side, but not adding those to our side. So it made it look like they were charging a lot more than we were charging, even though those two charts were, one was including tariffs and other stuff, and the other wasn't.
We have a great group of premiers, and the Prime Minister listens to what we have to say.
But if your voice will be included in this conversation, what would an approach?
Damn, Nike gonna be in trouble.
Be willing to accept?
Well, I thought the USMCA deal that President Trump put together and said that it was the greatest deal ever, I'd love to see that stay the way it is. I want to increase trade, and be it the critical minerals that China has cut the U.S. off, be it the high-grade nickel or other critical minerals that the U.S. can't get. There's no one else in the world.
A
double rainbow?
What is LBC? Does anybody know? Something in the UK.
On a text, what the F is he going on about? Ian has got the pithiest comment so far on a text. What the F is he going on about? Well, I have three experts with me to answer that question, so I don't have to. Several of you are saying this is like the Eurovision Song Contest. Simon Marks, have some pithy words of your own to tell us.
I do have some pithy words of my own, Ian. I mean, first of all, it's a bit of a win for the UK because, as you heard him announce there, he's going to tariff the UK at 10%. But he then went on to say that 10% is the baseline for any country. And if you looked at that chart that he was holding up there, and I've never been in a situation where I was literally sort of freezing the video here to try and read what the chart said. But some of the other countries that are tariffed at 10% include Singapore and Chile. By contrast, I think Israel is being tariffed at 17%. So, you know, this is the lowest tariff that the UK could possibly have expected to face, given that he's implementing across the board what he calls reciprocal tariffs, and he says the the US is charged an average of 10% by the UK, and he's charging the UK 10%. That's in contrast to tariffs of 20% on the European Union, 34% for China, 26% for India. So the government can, I think, in London, take comfort from the fact that it's done as well as any other country has performed in this extraordinary series.
Social Mail says, on the chart, European Union projected tariff equals 20%. That corresponds to the sales tax in effect in most European countries. Michael Nightwolf says, we are importing more goods from Canada than we are exporting. We need to dramatically flip that. Raymond says, U.S. goods exports to Canada in 2024, $349 billion, and U.S. goods imports from Canada in 2024, $412 billion. Population of Canada, 40 million. U.S. is 25 million. Each Canadian buys more U.S. goods.
Series of numbers that President Trump has been reading out. He is absolutely determined that this is going to result in money pouring into the United States, not just in the form of tariffs, which of course will be passed on to American consumers and will lead to rampant inflation here, according to every single one of America's Nobel Prize winning economists. But he's also convinced that this is going to lead to a manufacturing boom in the United States, because foreign exporters will realize that if they want to avoid the tariffs on their products, they should simply come in and invest in manufacturing plants in the United States, create jobs here, build their products here, and then evade the president's tariff regime altogether. I think the key line that we heard from President Trump in the rather lengthy build-up to all of that was this one. In many cases, he said, the friend is worse than the foe in terms of trade. And if you listen to what he was saying there about South Korea, about Japan, about the European Union, I mean, those 25% tariffs are going to have a devastating impact, for example, on Germany's automotive sector, because he's keeping the 25% tariffs in place on foreign-made cars and car parts manufactured outside the United States and sent to the United States. You know, he has targeted friends of the United States with as much vigor and animus as he has targeted foes of the United States. And there will be those, I think, in European capitals who say, we really do now have to recalibrate our relationship with the United States on the basis that as far as trade is concerned, President Trump is literally saying there, the friend is worse than the foe. But I think in London tonight, and I know your other guests in the studio in London will opine on this, I suspect they will be breathing a bit of a sigh of relief that it's only 10% for the UK.
Simon, thank you. Natasha Clark, she never opines. She gets considered analysis, don't you, Natasha? But as Simon said, Downing Street is going to breathe a sigh of relief tonight, aren't they?
Yeah, I think so.
I don't really care about Downing Street. Trump Liberation Day speech.
Cooper.
I don't trust CBS News. The 60 Minutes screwed me over last time. Can somebody react to this chart?
Customers have already frozen their purchases. So President Trump here, Kana, really making a big political gamble here. He had campaigned, of course, on lowering inflation, on lowering costs for everyday Americans. But instead, this is most certainly going to raise prices for Americans at home.
All right, Selena Wang, you will. And look, there's the chart right there, Selena. And China, of course, includes roughly 60 countries. In fact, he took the time to hold up a chart to really explain their calculation here. So for more, I want to bring in Selena Wang, who's in our D.C. bureau. And Selena, if I can, let's start with these kind reciprocal tariffs, if you will. And look, there's the...
So it says tariffs charged to the U.S., including currency manipulation and trade barriers. So, I mean, what does that mean? I mean, how do you even, you'd have to do so much research to double check this. Right?
Chart right there, Selena, and China, of course, is at the top of it. So he said they're going to use these reciprocal tariffs at about 50%. This isn't what we anticipated, but this is what his plan is, and he's showing you their math here. So he's saying they tax the United States 67%, so they are going to have a discounted reciprocal tariff there at 34%. Again, reiterating, Selena, that certainly China at the very top of that list.
But, Kana, also important to point out here that we don't know exactly how the White House is calculating those numbers.
Thank you. Finally.
Those tariff rates, they are very high. It is higher than what a lot of economists and policymakers were expecting when it comes to China. We're talking about a 34% tariff rate, 26% on India, and 24% for Japan. So we're talking about not only our adversaries, but also our allies getting hit with these very steep tariffs. And in addition to that, the president also saying that he'll be imposing universal tariffs, a baseline tariff of 10% on all imports from all countries. So this is certain to upend the global trading system. It could have a serious impact on the global economy, Kana.
Well, I wasn't aware of this 10% baseline tariff. I mean, on everything. That's crazy.
Certainly, and as Rebecca Jarvis just mentioned there, the stock futures are already trending much lower than they were at the close of the stock market today. I want to bring in ABC News senior political correspondent Rachel Scott, who was there during this speech. And Rachel Scott, he actually took the time to bring up a member of the United Auto Workers Union. They're from Detroit, who was very positive and optimistic here, noting that there's a 25% tariff now on all Ford-made autos starting at midnight, Rachel.
Yes, Kana, and this is the split screen that we are seeing play out here in this country right now, because you do have the auto workers, steel workers who are present here in the Rose Garden who say that this is...
Michael Nightwolf, I'm curious why it wasn't higher than 10%. I mean, that would have been crazy. How could have the world economy gone on if it was a 30% on anything that ever entered the U.S.? Reactions to the chart on CNN, BBC, Bloomberg. Can you send me those videos, please? lichtman.sam@gmail.com.
a good thing, that they are excited, they are eager to see manufacturing start to get back up to speed here in the United States. But even they acknowledge that this is not going to be a
10% isn't low. I don't know why you think it's low.
on and off switch, right? This could take months. This could take years. This could take a while for this actually to get up and running. Now, the White House says, trust the president on this, that it will actually happen. But, Kana, look, I just got back from Wisconsin on our road trip there. We also and for their own bottom lines back at home, Kana.
And no question, certainly a lot of Americans wondering about that. Rachel Scott, our thanks to you. I also want to bring in our chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce, for us now as well. And Mary, really to elaborate there on what we're hearing from Rachel, as much as we learned today, there is still an overwhelming amount here of uncertainty of what this means for the future of Americans, their own pocketbooks, but also, Mary, how even the White House actually calculated this rate of tariffs that we're going to see.
Well, look, the president has been saying now for weeks, even out on the campaign trail, that what they tariff us, we are now going to tariff them. Now, the White House says because he is lenient, and as the president said there in the Rose Garden, because he is kind, he's only charging what they are describing as the worst offenders half of what they charge us. So there's this 10% baseline tariff on all countries, and then those who go beyond that, they are going to put that 50% rate tariff on them, half of what they charge us. There are a lot of questions about how this is all going to play out, because make no mistake, these countries, many of them have already said they are going to retaliate. They are going to respond. We have heard that from the European Union, saying that they have a strong
I wonder if HoneyBook has
Philip H. is saying you needed Jamie. Yeah. It is hard to search for things and be on air at the same time.
If you look at that, China, first row, China, 67%. That's tariffs charged to the USA, including currency manipulation and trade barriers. So 67%, I think you can, for the most part, see it. Those with good eyes, with bad eyes. We didn't want to bring, it's very windy out here. We didn't want to bring out the big charts because it had.
BBC is breaking this all down. Okay. BC. They don't have a live one going.
It's so pathetic. Shinzo Abe. He was a fantastic man. He was unfortunately taken from us, assassination. But I went to him and I said, Shinzo,
go to Sky.
He is set to unleash reckless tsunami of tariffs. Prices will rise on medicines, cars, homes, appliances, metals, paper, beer, lumber, fertilizer, and more. And then he goes on to say,
lost altogether or scaled back. One Northern Ireland.
The UK, but that, as far as the White House is concerned, is just a baseline. And then on top of that, there are different tariffs.
Of dollars really well. 2,500.
What do you say to American families?
That Cambodia, Vietnam tariff, and he said by
It is not going to happen anymore. And holding aloft a cardboard chart with the foreign trade tariffs, he called this the golden age of America, our declaration of economic independence. Tariffs, he said, have decimated America's industrial base. But from now on, world trade will be unpredictable, expensive, more complicated. Now we see who can cope and who will fail, where business will choose to trade and choose to locate. And that question again of who is Trump policy designed. 10 o'clock, well, let's bring in our US correspondent, Mark Stone, who listened through that. Enormous tariffs for some nations. The UK, I guess, Mark, breathing something of a sigh of relief.
Yes, what an historic day. The event, the show was Trump to a T with the baseball cap in hand, the large posters with the numbers on it, and in the audience, the hard hats of the blue-collar workers who he says will the global economy. The headlines are that there will be two levels of tariffs, a baseline universal tariff of 10% on all countries, which will go into effect on the 5th of April at 12:01 a.m. And then on top of that, specific reciprocal tariffs rates for countries that are the worst offenders. That will go into effect on the 9th of April at 12:01. So a little bit more time for those worst offenders, the UK not among them, to work out what they do, whether they retaliate or whether they try to carve out some sort of a deal by removing their own tariffs that they have in place on the United States. About 60 countries make up the worst offenders as Trump sees it. China, 60 tariffs, according to the United States, charged by China on America, 67%. And so they've halved that. That is what Donald Trump has said that they've done. To be kind, he said. So 34% universal tariffs from China on China by the United States, the European Union 20%. But the key for us, of course, for the UK is what the rate is, and it is a rate of 10% on all goods coming from the UK into the United States, the 6%. So right now in Downing Street, the President announced them trying to establish what now, where now, how development from here.
Of the auto industry, the 25% autos tariff, a Reuters analysis of the tariffs presented tonight suggests they will extend to nearly $600 billion worth of auto parts. That's just one example. Well, Sir Keir Starmer has clearly tackled this quite differently to the European Union.
They went from the hope that... Well, Anna, it's been quite a rollercoaster for the government, where they went from the hope that they could avoid tariffs, that they could get that, and this is the last of the they tell us to work out what it means. There is a 25% tariff on cars that could hit with billions on UK exports, and then this 10% tariff. So they'll be crunching the numbers to work out what the fallout is for the economy. But I can tell, take down from
response was, it's all just so massive. So what is your assessment?
Well, let me just give you a sense of what we know so far about this. There's still a few unanswered questions, but finally we got the detail on what Donald Trump meant by this Liberation Day. And let me just kind of start by showing you these bars are how high those tariffs, the US tariffs, are on various different countries around the world at the moment, or rather before Donald Trump came into office, and a quick kind of bit of revision on where we've come from so far. So threatened tariffs on Mexico and Canada. They were repeatedly threatened, repeatedly rescinded or lifted, but they might well be back again, who knows. But for the time being, they're gone. We know we got an extra 10% tariffs on China, China 1.0, then another extra 10% tariffs on China 2.0, you might call them. And we're now kind of waiting to find out what happened next. And we finally did find it out. Let's just start. There are two parts to this, OK? So first of all, there is going to be a 10% baseline tariff. So you see all of these bars go up by 10%, including, of course, the UK. But that, as far as the White House is concerned, is just a baseline. And then on top of that, there are different tariffs for different nations, what they call...
So China's going to almost have 50% tariff? That's wild.
Reciprocal tariffs. And they say they've gone through the numbers.
On everything.
They've looked at not just the tariffs that other countries around the world are charging the US, but also what they call non-tariff barriers, so other things. And they've worked out, by the way, Canada, those Mexico-Canada tariffs might well come back, so we might well start from that position. But reciprocal tariffs might push all of these bars, or will push all of these bars up considerably higher. So just look at how the picture of trade and tariffs in the US has changed dramatically as a result of these measures which are coming in the next few days. And just to give you a few highlights of what we're talking about, so you could look, for instance, over there at China. So China, that's a 34% reciprocal tariff, but it takes the total amount provided.
That's crazy. Did not realize that. I thought China was just going to be charged 34%. They're going to be charged 50%.
That goes on top of the existing tariff.
So we don't know if that goes on top or not?
It takes the total amount up above 50%. And you're talking, you know, when tariffs are going above 50%, that makes any trade very, very difficult.
That can't be right. That just seems crazy. That can't be. If that's right, that's crazy. I mean, there'd just be no trade between China.
And far less likely to happen. So that's China, but you can probably see here, Vietnam as well. And the point here from the White House has been to say, listen, lots of Chinese goods going into the US, but also going through, being Vietnam and Cambodia as well, being conduits for goods to go to America. And the point here from Donald Trump is that the US wants to reindustrialize. And so it's all about trying to make things domestically. But finally, look at the UK. 10% on the UK. And for many people here, obviously, it is a big increase on where things were before, only a few percent, the average rate for the UK. But that goes up to 10%. It is the best rate that anyone has amongst any nations. In fact, the best rate that any G7, any leading economy in the world has, and certainly better than the EU, all of whom are having to pay an extra 20% in total, so 10% and another 10% on top. But even so, all of this will potentially diminish the amount of trade going on around the world and diminish the amount of stuff going into the US. And finally, it's worth just saying, what was the stock market reaction? Well, this decision was made after markets had closed, but we can look at the futures market. This is the NASDAQ futures market, and look at what happened. It went up a little bit after the announcement, and then it's come down quite considerably. So a market reaction there, which implies that when markets open in Asia, and indeed when they were open across the US and Europe, we're going to see some falls to come.
Dude, I did not realize that the tariffs could be as high as he's saying. That's wild.
As people respond to this.
Ed, take a seat. I've got another question for you. There is more coming out of the White House right now, senior White House officials, etc. Trump is to sign an order that closes the de minimis loophole. This is according to an aide. Tell us why that is significant and how it might affect a nation like China, for example.
So this is on top of all of those things we were showing you. De minimis basically means that for really small, kind of low-value items that are going in and out of countries, a lot of that stuff just isn't charged a tariff. So what is a tariff ultimately? It is just, you know, we're going to charge you 20% on everything that comes into the country, although it's the recipient that actually pays it. But for fast fashion, for items that are going in that are relatively cheap, and this is a big thing for China, you know, you've got companies like Shein who are sending stuff relatively cheaply from Guangdong and different parts of China. Right now, that's not subject to any tariffs. Donald Trump said earlier on, so when he had one of his early kind of, we're going to impose tariffs on China, he said, we're getting rid of de minimis. But then what happened was that suddenly, in airports around the US, you were seeing massive big piles of goods that no one was quite sure what to do with, because it's an enormous administrative challenge. And I think that, Anna, is the bigger issue here. Raising all of these tariffs, different tariffs on different countries, and a kind of extraordinary smorgasbord of different numbers we've just seen, and Donald Trump, you know, held up this chart of all of different numbers. it is likely to just increase the amount of work that it takes for America to collect these tariffs. But the point that Donald Trump wants to make, can I show one more chart, like as a bonus thing? But the point that Donald Trump wants to make is that back in a long time ago, the majority of federal revenues came from tariffs, raising money from tariffs, and right now that line is basically down, you know, close to zero, kind of only a few percent. And his point is always, rather than raising money through income tax, couldn't we raise it again through tariffs? And I'll spare you the next charts, but point out that ultimately that is really, really tough to do. It's really tough in the modern world of 2025 when you have, welfare states, when you have Medicare, when you have, standing armies that are quite expensive. You can't just raise all of your money through tariffs. No one has been able to do that. And so that is the challenge that he's faced with right now. But what he wants to do is to be able to say, we're going to try and reindustrialise, hence all of those tariffs on China, on Vietnam, on Cambodia, and we're going to try and raise a bit of money from it in the process. And I think that's the selling point. But what comes next is the retaliation. We start to hear from, Europe, and we know they're going to retaliate. What comes next is more market reaction. And this is going to roll and roll. Even though we've got detail tonight, we're going to be talking about this for many weeks and months to come.
Indeed so. He's talking about $6 trillion of inward investment, isn't he, already, as nations relocate to America, which is his hope, quite clearly. Let's get more reaction then, shall we, around the world from two places which have been in the tariff spotlight. Sky's Europe correspondent Adam Parsons is in Brussels and Dan Whitehead is in Toronto, Canada. Adam, to you, first of all, 20%. What is the likely response from the Europeans?
Well, as Ed has just been saying, there will be a response. There will be some form of retaliation. But I think at the moment, Europe is taking a breath, appraising this and trying to decide just how firmly it should react. And there are a few schools of thought here. Look, number one is the German car industry, 25% tariff. We knew that was coming, but that is going to hit that industry hard. The second thing is a 20% tariff across the board. It is harder to deal with than some of the models that have been talked about here in Europe. I think the worst case they saw was 25% across the board. So there will be those who take which have hard fucking reach. Raises all sorts of unexpected consequences. They will think about this. They're going to canvass opinions. But one other thought just for you tonight is that this also raises all sorts of unexpected consequences. And one of them is going to be about Northern Ireland, because Ireland now has a 20% tariff with America. Northern Ireland has a 10% tariff with America. That is going to make the Windsor framework even harder to implement.
Yes, certainly something that was raised at Pride. Irrevocably changed the point there. Thank you. Well, let's bring in Dan Whitehead in Toronto in Canada. The problem is, though, clearly a tariff believer. Well, Dan Whitehead, live for us there amidst the car parts. Thank you very much indeed. Well, let us return to our US correspondent, Mark Stone, at the White House. Clearly a tariff believer. Once said it was his favourite word. The problem is, though, it could trigger recession in America, the inflationary aspects of this. What is he now expecting to happen?
What a great question, Anna. I think he is expecting countries to come grovelling. I think he is expecting that they will feel that these tariffs are so high, that they are so damaging for them, that they will lower their own, and that they will try and level the playing field everywhere.
Claire Hanna said at a time when big tech has grown fat by corrupting our politics and preying on our young people, is it the wrong approach to pander to his bullying tactics and protect tech billionaires? So there might be some pushback in the House of Commons on that. Mark, we've had reaction too from the UK Business Secretary and President.
These tariffs,
talks about tariffs being revenue raisers to offset the tax bill.
you're working on. At the same time, you and the president also talk about a negotiation you're willing to do to get reciprocity when it comes to other trading partners. How can it be both revenue raising and a negotiation?
Well, to the extent that the tariffs are higher than what we had, it will raise revenues. And, as far as the negotiations, we'll see. And, I could tell you, though, it's not going to be possible to include the tariffs in the CBO scoring. So that will be something running in the background. And as the president said, we've taken in several $100 billion on the China tariffs, but those don't get scored.
Do you feel that you need to have enough revenue raised from these tariffs before this reconciliation package comes to play in Congress?
Well, I don't think we have to have the revenues raised. And look, we're doing two things. Tariffs are going to raise revenues, and then we're also stamping out waste, fraud, and abuse in the government and bringing down the expenses and spending. And we're not going to get credit for either of those with the CBO scoring. So, when your audience, when American people see these CBO scores, there could be large, but there is a substantial amount of tariff income. There's a substantial amount of savings.
While all this is happening, consumer sentiment has definitely taken a bit of a dive. Expectations for inflation have gone up. Banks like...
I don't like this guy. He seems just like at a central casting for evil rich guy.
How concerned are you that the timing of all this is going to be incredibly challenging because of how the American consumer, how corporate America is feeling at this moment?
Well, it tells me a couple of things. One, we got to get the tax bill done quickly, because that's a confidence builder. And two, we're seeing sentiment surveys from the American people, but we haven't actually seen them take action. If the households actually thought that there were going to be inflation, if their real inflation expectations had increased, what would they be doing? They'd be hoarding goods, and they would be demanding wage increases, and neither one of those has happened yet.
So at the moment, you're not concerned about some of the soft data we're seeing?
No, I see nothing. And one of the great things, many great things about being a Treasury is we have lots of business people come through, and everything we're seeing in the economy is still very solid.
And executives haven't voiced any of these concerns onto you?
No, there's some idiosyncratic things, but in terms of the expectations actually turning into hard data, none of them have seen it yet.
Now that you're working on the tax bill, and of course tariffs at the moment are out of the way, what else is on the agenda for you for the rest of the year?
Well, we have the Ukraine deal that's coming up. We've gone to maximum pressure on Iran, so a big part.
This guy used to be a big Democrat donor too, if I remember correctly.
Doing a big push on deregulating in a smart, safe, and sound way the regulated financial institutions, which is going to allow for the private sector, not the government sector, to grow.
When it comes to international, where are you with Iran, Ukraine and the mineral deal?
I believe we may have a team from Ukraine coming over as soon as the end of this week or the beginning of next week. Ukrainians have, I believe that they've hired counsel. And what we did was after the incident in the White House on, I believe it was February 28th, we were going to sign a 4-page deal that was parameters of understanding. And at Treasury, we took the opportunity to move forward to the big deal. So this is the exact same deal that would have resulted from the 4-page signature.
Dave C. says lies, lies, and more lies from the Trump administration.
I believe this deal is so important for the American people, for the Ukrainian.
I don't want to hear from this guy anymore. He sucks.
2 weeks, you're going to have this deal over the finish line.
Say, Peter, this is a disaster and we're going to vote for it? No way. Thank you, Senator Kaine. Mr. President, I yield.
%. Japan, very, very tough.
Here we go. Finally got a fact checked. Let's go.
Great people. And again, I don't blame the people for doing it. I think they're very smart in doing it. I blame the people that sat right in that Oval Office right over there right behind the Resolute desk or whichever desk they chose. Japan, 46%. They would charge us 46%.
If you are still watching, we thank you. If you are watching and you are confused, we're here to help you. I'm going to bring into our coverage Bloomberg News anchor and correspondent David Gura. David, let me do a little bit of fact-checking thanks to our friends over at the New York Times. Just on the trade deficits that he keeps talking about. Times reports that Trump talks about the trade deficits the United States has amassed with other countries and says, quote, we're really not taking it anymore. The trade deficit is the difference between what a country exports and imports. The U.S. has long imported more goods than it exports. Trump said his tariffs offered an example of his administration standing up for our great farmers and ranchers. As a reminder, though, the administration had to offer special federal aid to farmers who were hurt by his trade war with China during his first term. The White House recently discussed doing that again. The 25% tariff on cars and car parts that Trump is talking about goes into effect just after midnight. The United Auto Workers Union is a strong supporter of those tariffs. But auto companies and economists have said they will lead to significantly higher car prices and could even slow U.S. auto production in the short run with supply chain issues. I want to also talk about, this is all sort of a cherry-picked selection, but the Times also with this fact check, quote, Trump is mentioning many high tariffs that other countries put on American products, but not the high tariffs that the United States charges on certain products. And then they go through the list of things. We are, I guess, in Trump's narrative on the other side of the tariff dynamic. In terms of nodding to the fact that none of his economic advisors prior to serving in Donald Trump's cabinet ever advocated for tariffs, talk about what has been put in place so far today.
So we're going to learn more details here, probably not from the chart that the president is holding up there, but we know that there's going to be this 10% universal tariff. This is something that he talked about a lot on the campaign trail, and he's characterizing the reciprocal tariffs that he's putting in place here is kind of benevolent, as less than they could have been. He could have gone full, he said, but he didn't. But what's going to be interesting to watch here is how all of these trading partners, these countries respond to what the president is putting in place. And you bring up the auto tariffs, for instance. This is something he talked about before. So he's kind of couching this as a novel announcement today. We knew that those were going to be put in place, those 25% tariffs on foreign imports of automobiles and parts. You're right to point out that these are economic advisors who aren't well known for espousing a lot of interest in or hope for these tariffs before they got into that position. But what we've heard from the White House time and time again is this is an economic team that has walked in line here with the president who, as we know and we've known for so long, really believes in the power of these tariffs, despite in a lot of cases what consensus tells us.
Angel Rupp says this is your Brexit. That's a fair point.
What most economists say the effects of these tariffs are going to be. So, again, it'll be interesting to see sort of what the response is now that we have this announcement. And so the story that we've talked about over these last many weeks, Nicole, is just the level of uncertainty that this process has kind of infused into markets and the economy and the way that countries act in regard to the United States. There's a bit more clarity here. I think that you're seeing kind of in the market response that we're seeing in the futures market. Some relief. Probably these tariffs aren't as big as perhaps many investors worried or thought they might be. But again, this is kind of the beginning stage of sort of figuring out what happens next and how open this president's negotiating around these tariffs.
I'm really confused by that Sky News guy. I mean, he's saying that they're not as high as people expected, but then the Sky News guy says they're added on top of all these other tariffs.
Tariffs as well. I think that we haven't heard much from him yet in the speech in the Rose Garden about his appetite for doing that. And I'll just say lastly, this has been the open question that a lot of investors and observers have had over the course of his second term. Are these negotiating gambits? Is this a mechanism by which companies and sectors and countries will have an opportunity to kind of work with the White House to figure out a trade deal that's palatable to the White House? I don't think that we know that yet, Nicole.
I wonder, because tariffs are so unpopular and, in the view of economists, ineffective as economic tools, it's worth explaining that they are regressive taxes, that annual losses for households of...
Tony says, Sam, this has to be the best show you ever did. Really? Thank you.
The bottom of the income distribution would range from about $1,900 to $2,400. Food prices will go up 1.85%. For all of those voters who were agitated by the price of things like eggs, tariffs, and this isn't any sort of partisan analysis that we've eyeballed here, but tariffs indisputably will make things more expensive.
You know, the thing to which economists look is the Smoot-Hawley Act from 1930 that was seen as a colossal mistake by the U.S. government putting those broad-based tariffs in place. I should say they were put in place by Congress. That's not what's happening here. This is the president doing this unilaterally, but of course with the support of the Republican Party, but not done by Congress. That was seen as a cautionary tale for many decades of protectionism. And so we've learned lessons from that over almost a whole century. This flies in the face of that. And so you're right to bring up the fact that if you look at that as a guideline, if you look at kind of traditional mainstream economics as a guideline here, the result of that is these tariffs are going to be inflationary. They're going to lead to higher prices. And you heard the president in his remarks nodding to the fact that his administration is focused on lowering prices and intends to do so.
God, this guy's boring as hell.
In the last few minutes, US President Donald Trump has announced sweeping tariffs on goods imported into the United States from all countries, including the UK. British-made products will face tariffs of 10% from this Saturday. 10% is the baseline tariff applying to all countries in the world. There will, though, be higher, more punitive tariffs on about 60 other countries, which Mr. Trump sees as the worst offenders when it comes to trade imbalances with the United States. For example, 34% tariffs on goods from China. Well, the president also confirmed a 25% tariff on foreign-made cars effective from midnight US time. He said that together, all these tariffs will raise hundreds of billions of dollars a year for the United States, making, in his words, America wealthy again. Well, the president has been speaking in the Rose Garden of the White House on what he's billed as America's Liberation Day, though for many around the world there are now fears of a global trade war, economic slowdown and recession. Well, tonight we'll have analysis and reaction from around the UK and across the world throughout the programme. We'll be hearing from our economics editor, Faisal Islam, and also from our political editor, Chris Mason, on how the UK government will react to these 10% tariffs on British goods. But first, let's go to Sarah Smith at the White House and Sarah Donald Trump.
Why does this guy look so funny?
But first, let's go to Sarah. Will react.
Looks like he's like he's ready to like draw a gun. He's like, pow.
To these 10% tariffs on British goods. But first, let's go to Sarah Smith at the White House and Sarah Donald Trump saying this is one of the most important days in US history.
Yes, he says that economic moves like this haven't been done since the Second World War, and the
LLL, thank you for your donation. They say great show and live comments on news and facts checks. Thanks, LLL. I appreciate that.
He is declaring economic independence for the United States. So as you said, there will be tariffs ranging from 10% all the way up to 50% being charged on different countries to export their goods into the United States. And Donald Trump explained that he has set these tariffs depending on how other countries treat US exports. Have a listen to what he had to say.
In a few moments, I will sign a historic executive order instituting reciprocal tariffs on countries throughout the world. Reciprocal, that means they do it to us and we do it to them. Very simple. Can't get any simpler than that.
Now, by reciprocal, we should explain what that means, because it's not just a direct tariff for tariff. What's happened is that the White House have calculated all the different ways in which they see trade barriers. So that could be straight tariffs. It could be other non-tariff barriers, like, for instance, technical restrictions, maybe a ban on imports of something like genetically modified corn or hormone-injected beef, that sort of thing. If you need a license to import goods from America, that also counts. They talk about currency manipulation and even the theft of intellectual property. So there are lots and lots of ways in which they have come up with some kind of sum that they say represents the totality of the tariffs that American goods are faced when they are being exported into China.
Do you think the global anti-incumbent wave was because Putin saw the opportunity to interfere with all elections? I don't know.
Or Cambodia or the EU or the UK, for instance.
Hello, Tim. I'm just confused by, again, Sky News seems to be the only one reporting that these are reciprocal tariffs on top of other tariffs.
They've come up with a number, which, for instance, in Cambodia's case is 97% is what they say the tariff on American goods going there is. So they're halving that and charging 49%. With the EU, they say that they had added up all of the different restrictions they see between trade between the US and the EU. They brought that to 39%, and that's why there's a 20% tariff going on. But other countries that don't send is what they say exported into totality of the manipulation and even the theft of intellectual property. So there are lots and lots of ways in which they have come up with some kind of sum that they say represents the totality of the tariffs that American goods are faced when they are being exported into China or Cambodia or the EU or the UK, for instance. They've come up with a number which, for instance, in Cambodia's case is 97% is what they say the tariff on American goods going there is. So they're halving that and charging 49%. With the EU, they say that they had added up all of the different restrictions they see between trade between the US and the EU. They brought that to 39%, and that's why there's a 20% tariff going on. But other countries that don't fall under this heading, a blanket 10% tariff is being put on all other goods, and that's where the UK falls.
OK, Sarah, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. So as we've been hearing, the UK is facing 10% tariffs on the goods it exports to the US. Well, earlier today, the Chancellor Rachel Reeves indicated the UK government will not rush to retaliate against new American tariffs.
That's rectangular, but that will US continue to.
We can also talk to our economics editor, Faisal Islam, who's with me in the studio. Faisal, these tariffs are clearly going to have a huge impact on the British economy, also the global economy. What's your assessment of where we are tonight?
When you step back, I think you have to give the context to this, which this is an extraordinary move, actually. Even if we may have expected larger numbers in some regards, hundreds of billions of dollars per year is what they say it should raise. $6 trillion over a decade was the figure that Donald Trump used. They confirmed the 25% car tariffs coming into force tonight, no exclusions for the UK. And at base, although we heard a lot about reciprocal tariffs, so, you know, tit for tat, quid pro quo, based on what is done to America right now, at base, there's a 10% universal tariff for everybody. So it may be a relief that the UK is at that lower ebb, but that still means $6 billion on that. Maybe if you include the cars, $7 billion of extra costs. But the point of this, we hear, is to divert trade flows. I think we can see the document that was held up by President Trump there, and you see a whole sort of list. And in the blue there, you see what America thinks is being done to it. And it isn't just the tariff, as Sarah was saying. It's currency manipulation and other trade barriers. And President Trump says he's being kind by only sort of replying with half of that. But there are some huge numbers there, including some rather poor countries, some crisis countries like Myanmar and Laos and Bangladesh. They're on 37%. China on 34%. Well, that's huge. European Union on 20% when the UK is on 10%. Well, that's a net benefit, you might argue, for the UK, but also it could create some distortions to trade. The bottom line is this: the model of trade in the world will shift hugely. That is the point of this change, but it could cause Taiwan, a key ally of the US, also tariffed hugely. So this could change the geography of economics for good, and it's designed to do so, and that will not be without some disruption.
OK, Faisal, thank you very much indeed. Faisal Islam, our economics.
Gosh, I wish someone had a really smart breakdown of that chart, because that chart just looks so weird to me. Let me check Blue Sky if people are talking about the chart. Wait, I want to see this from Jim Banks. Hold on.
Laid off in all these massive job cuts that Doge and President Trump have been doing?
Look, this guy was chasing me and other Republican senators through the hallways. Of course not. My comments were directed at this fellow, who can't even explain what his job was. It was a woke job that wasted taxpayer dollars, and I'm thankful that President Trump eliminated that job to save tax dollars at a time when we have a $37 trillion national debt. That's what we're getting at. Cut wasteful spending, save those tax dollars. No hardworking family in Indiana deserves to pay the salary of someone like that.
I'm genuinely asking, how do you know what job he has or had?
He can't explain it. I've read online what he had to say about his job. It doesn't make sense. He couldn't even explain it on CNN earlier today when you had him on your station exactly what he did do, which is what he was a probationary short-term employee.
Been laid off.
Doesn't he? Says he has a woke job. Doesn't even know what he does. Why are our politicians such scummy people? That's what I want to know. Hold on. I'm a stargazer. Sorry, I'm scrolling through Blue Sky right now. Trying to see if I can find anything interesting. Okay, never mind. Nothing interesting on Blue Sky.
My name is Kate.
All right, folks, I'm running out of steam a little bit here. I might call it a night. I might come back and play some video games in maybe half an hour or something. We'll see. But for now, I'm going to sign off. Keep an eye out. I might do a late night with Slam, playing some video games and chilling after all this. Quite a historic day for sure. There is going to be economic change across the world. What that means for humanity, I'm not sure. And I think, unfortunately, only time will tell. Hopefully, Republicans don't use this as an excuse to pass some sweeping tax bill that benefits only the rich. That's my main hope right now. But thank you all for being here. Thank you all for tuning in. See you later, alligators.